Welcome to another live stream. I'm going to be talking about the state of the comic book industry. And right now, I believe we are in the last days of the comic book industry. When I take a critical look at the comic book industry from a panoramic perspective over the last 25 years, I clearly see where the industry is in the final stages of its decline. And the reason why I believe that the industry is in the final stages of its decline is because I've looked at the whole overall state of the business of the comic book industry, and there's at this point it's pretty much done. Now, back in 2011, I believe I wrote an ebook called An Analysis of the Comic Book Industry's Business Issues. And in that book, I detailed a comprehensive plan for fixing some of the issues in the comic book industry, which had been in trouble as far back as 1995. Now, back in 1995, that's when Marvel Comics decided to go out here and buy Heroes World. And when they bought Heroes World, what that did was they were trying to go into distribution, but they didn't really understand the business of distribution, because with distribution, you really need to understand how returns work. And in the business of comics, if you don't understand how returns work, with returns, you have to give the people store credit for books that are unsold. And what Marvel didn't really understand was how returns worked and how returns affected their business. So that's one of the reasons why they went bankrupt, because they were stuck with all those unsold books, and they had no way to deal with all of those losses they were taking, because at the time Marvel's catalog was over 100 titles. And yeah, Bombor, I will be at the Schomburg Center's Black Comic Con this Friday. That's when me and a family member are going to get ready to go to that con, but I am going to be there this Friday. But with the distribution problems, that's what really led to the start of the decline of the comic book industry after the boom period of the 1990s. Now, ever since then, it has been a slow decline. And things, yes, they were bad in the 1990s after Marvel filed for bankruptcy, but no one has really worked on a really constructive solution towards fixing the overall state of the comic book industry. Then one of the big problems that has led to them not really working on the solution, as I see it, is that we really have not had a lot of publishing professionals working in the comic book industry. Because when I look at one of the reasons why we're having all these problems on the Marvel side is they hired Joe Quesada to be an editor-in-chief over at Marvel. And yes, he was a great artist and a fairly decent writer, but he was not a businessman who really understood publishing. And Marvel really needed a publishing pro to come in and really deal with a lot of the editorial issues as related to Marvel's catalog, because at the time, in I'd say about 2001, they were having trouble because they had all these great creators like your Kurt Busieks, your George Perez's, your Mark Waid's, and guys like Sean Chen on books like Iron Man, Captain America, and the Avengers. But a lot of those creators, they were getting towards the end of their run. So what happened was they didn't really know how to transition to a secondary team of creators. And what they did was, on books like Iron Man, they put a really bad writer, Frank Thierry, on Iron Man, and that didn't really work too well. And they also put other writers like Dan Jurgens on Captain America. He really didn't work out too well. And they didn't really have a plan for transitioning from the A creative team to a B creative team. And that's one of the problems they had that led to Marvel really winding up in trouble. Hello, wrestling superstar. I'm glad that you're here. But this is one of the problems they had, was they could not transition. And the reason why they couldn't really transition, because you need a strong editor-in-chief to have a vision. so that you can transition from one creative team to another and flow seamlessly. And this is something that they used to be able to do under Jim Shooter, because he usually had a plan for when one creative team would leave, another one would come in. And there was also editorial there to supervise, to make sure that the character's integrity remained intact. And this is a big problem that started out in 2001. You really didn't have creators who understood that you had to maintain the character's integrity so that you could have an organic transition from one creative team to another creative team. So that was one of the big problems they had after the 1998, I believe, or 97 or 98 reboot was in 2001. They really just did not have the editorial to lead things, and that led into storylines like Avengers Disassembled, and that led into New Avengers, where they let Brian Michael Bendis come in over at Marvel, and he made a complete mess of things as related to the Avengers. Hey, Daytwan 3, salute. But that was the big problem over at Marvel. They had, again, no real editorial leadership, and that's where we started to see this, where they were starting to try to come back, but they couldn't come back because they just did not have the publishing professional to really lead Marvel. Now, over at DC, I started to see the hairline fractures over there once they brought in Dan Dido to run DC Comics. Now, Dan Dido, he came into DC and he had no real understanding why he wasn't into entertainment. He was like a guy who worked in Hollywood, but he didn't really understand the publishing business. And because he didn't understand the publishing business, he went out here and he was trying to do things like antagonize people in order to get sales, not understanding that when you have angry customers, what happens is those customers don't come back to buy products. And this is a big problem that has really plagued DC, is that you have it under the editorial control of a man who just doesn't understand the publishing business. When you understand the publishing business, you understand that you really do not want to really do too much to alienate customers. And one of the things he started with was the Titans Young Justice storyline Graduation Day, where he killed off Donna Troy. And then he led into that with Identity Crisis. Now, Identity Crisis, this was a story that really alienated a lot of comic fans. And this really made a lot of people very angry, because this storyline featured a rape of Sue Dibney, and it featured elements that really did not fit within DC's continuity, whether it was pre-crisis or post-crisis, in that you had characters who were acting completely out of character. And because you had characters acting completely out of character, this is what turned a lot of people off from DC Comics and led to them walking away from it. And this is what led to people just not really liking DC Comics at the point, and they were really blaming Dan Dido because he had derailed everything with his ideas. And one of the ideas, again, he had was this whole rape storyline, and then the mind wiping, which, again, put characters completely out of character and out of sync, and that really turned a lot of people off DC Comics at the point. And then as that turned out, he continued to go on with this whole dark, dreary story model, and that alienated more and more people. And that's what led to the serious sales declines at DC and Marvel. And as they started seeing these sales declines, what they would do to try to get people back was they would go out here and talk about reboots. And all of these reboots, what they would do is give people a reason to jump off the comic. And they jumped off the comic because the stories were not what the customer wanted. And this is one of the reasons why the comic book industry, again, has had troubles over the last 2 or 3 decades. And things have gotten progressively worse because, again, you just don't have that publishing professional there to really guide the industry or really lead the creative people so that they have a direction. And that's the big problem, which has led to the decline of the comic book industry. Now, there are a lot of people who are looking at the state of what they call SJW Marvel, and they're saying how bad things are, but I saw how bad things were from the last 20 years. Tony H, what's the goal for this channel? Well, the goal for this channel is to promote my books and go out here and talk about issues in the Black community and talk about things as related to the comic book industry, because one of the things I publish at the SJS Direct imprint is African American fantasy and science fiction. And I publish that because I want to create positive stories about the African American experience, and I want to diversify the African American experience. But the primary reason why I have this channel, again, is to promote my books and my work. I'm working on my marketing right now. This is part of the marketing of the SJS Direct imprint, are these live streams and my YouTube videos. They're a way that I form a relationship with the viewers and I build my customer base. And that's something that the comic book industry just isn't doing right now, because when we look at the state of the comic book industry, a lot of the so-called comic book professionals, they're not really acting professional. They're not out here trying to engage the customer. They're not trying to get the customer excited about the product. When they go on social media, many of these people attack customers. They insult customers, and they participate in very egregious behaviors. If these individuals worked in something like fast food, what would happen is those people would be fired for providing bad customer service. But in the comic book industry, they have been given a huge pass, and they continue to go on thinking that, again, an angry reader is an engaged reader. But in trade publishing, like where I come from, and self-publishing, we know that that's not how you engage a customer. You engage a customer by forming a professional relationship with the customer. You engage the customer by treating the customer with respect, and you show the customer value by treating them the way you would want to be treated, and going out here and sharing your products and showing them respect. Yeah, dude's thoughts. The rebooting does cause a serious problem. That's one of the other problems that's related to the comic book industry. People want to read these books and not be confused. They want to be able to come in and just pick up a book and come in and then be able to go backwards to the back issues or forward with the next issues. And what's really confusing them is they can't go backwards, because what happens is that in one volume, the character is one way, and if they go forward, the series winds up canceled, and then they have to start all over again. And that's really frustrating when you're trying to follow a character. When you're trying to follow a character, it's really frustrating when you just started picking up a book and then all of a sudden you find out that that book is going to be canceled by issue 24 or issue 36. And most people, they're not going to sit there and start up a new series because Marvel or DC wants to reboot this series. And that's why the reboots, as I wrote in my blog and in my book, An Analysis of the Comic Book Industry's Business Issues, are complete failures as related to the comic book publishing business model. Because every time you reboot, again, the comic fan just wants to walk away because everything that they invested in no longer has value. And the new reader has no reason to invest in the comic, because the comic is a new story, but then they don't know if the series is going to stay stable. And the owner of Coliseum Comics, he came to the same conclusion just a couple of months ago, but I came to that conclusion way back in 2011 when I was writing about the comic book industry. And in 2011, again, I wrote the ebook, An Analysis of the Comic Book Industry's Business Issues. And I talked about how comic book reboots fail and how they push people out of the comic book industry and stop them from collecting books, because all those books that they used to own no longer have any value. The stories they used to read have no more value, and they have no reason to really care about what they read in the past, and they have no reason to continue buying the book going forward because they're going to see these reboots coming up again. And at Marvel, they have been rebooting almost every year or so, and that's really frustrating again for the customers. And this is the other part of the comic industry that's really been a big problem, is that they're not really focusing on the customer and giving the customer a satisfactory reading experience. One of the things I try to do with the SJS Direct imprint is I try to give my readers a great reading experience. And that's something that I really pride myself on, is that I'm always trying to make sure that my customers are satisfied. I'm always trying to make sure that they get the best product possible. I mean, I'm just one guy, but I really care about my customers, and I really see these books made by Marvel and DC is that they have this great catalog of characters, but no one really cares about the quality of the products they produce. And that's really upsetting to me, because again, these characters are great characters, and I grew up with a lot of these characters, but you have a lot of people working in the industry who they really don't care about the quality of their products. They don't care about customer relations, and they don't really care about the business. And again, I believe the core foundation of that is the fact that many of these people working in the comic book industry are just not publishing professionals. And a publishing professional, again, they care about the quality of the product because they have a passion for publishing. They have an understanding of how the publishing business works, and they understand what they have to do to reach new audiences of readers. And people who are working in comics now, they really don't understand how publishing really works. A lot of them, again, like Dan Dido, he doesn't come from publishing. Your Joe Quesada doesn't come from publishing. Your Sana Amanat doesn't come from publishing, and they don't understand how the business model works. So that's why they're just going out here and publishing whatever they want. And that's why comics now look a lot like self-publishing. When I look at comics today, again, it reminds me a lot of what self-publishing used to be back in the 80s. You had people who would just publish whatever they wanted and then hope that it would sell, but that's just not how a trade publisher works. Usually a trade publisher, when they come out here, they usually have a plan when they launch a book. And because they have a plan, they are not only laying out their great story that the creators have, but they have a plan to market to a target audience, and they have a plan to market to smaller demographic audiences so they can reach the largest customer base of the core customer base, which is the core readers, and the target and the other audiences that are outside on the fringe. Now, when I went out here, and I remember I published, let me see, I remember back in 2015, I did some marketing myself for this novel, Spinsterella. Now, this Spinsterella novel was about a Black goth heroine. And when I started the marketing for this book in 2015, early as I was doing the edits, what I did was I went to people in the goth subculture as my core audience, and then I went to African Americans as my secondary audience. So I had a plan for what audiences I wanted to target. But with comics, we're not really seeing that, because when I look at certain books like Captain Marvel, I sat there and I was reading Captain Marvel #1 that just came out last week. I was like, who is this for? It doesn't really look like it's for anyone. And I look at books like your Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, there's no real target audience for these books. It's like they're here to promote so-called diversity, but there's no core audience. I mean, when the publishers create a product, like I publish a book, I have core audiences that I'm trying to target, and I'm also looking to reach those casual readers. So, but I'm not seeing, that type of focus over at Marvel, and that's a big problem when you don't see people looking to target an audience or reach a customer base. Just like you're just spending money and you're just wasting it, because if you're in publishing, you have to understand that 90% of all books fail, and you don't want to have books that don't make money. You want to be able to have at least 10% of those books making money to cover the losses of the 90, and we're not really seeing that type of business sense being used in the comic book industry. And that's why the comic book industry right now is what I believe in the final stages, because when I look at the final stages of the comic book industry, we have people just like they did in the 50s, just publishing random stuff, but no real focus. And the median age for the average comic book reader is not going down. And this is a big problem that's going to lead to the complete collapse of the comic book industry, I believe, in not a couple of years, but it's here, because the median age of your comic book reader is my age, which is 45. And if your median age is 45, then that's when corporations just stop producing products, because they know that the customer has one foot on a banana peel and the other foot in a grave. And when you have customers that old, there's no place for the brand to go. Brands that can go somewhere are brands that have a median age of about 13, 14. Those are good median ages, and that's what manga has right now. Manga's median age is a very strong median age. So manga's in a really strong place to compete. And when I look at manga, it's in a great place right now because it's reaching men, women, and children of all ages. And when I look at what Yellow Flash had talked about in one of his videos, 29 is a good age. It's a good age, Laura Darthstar. But you're 29, which is a good age. But that's what businesses want, is people in their teens and their 20s and their 30s. But once you hit 40, they really don't want customers that old, because customers that old, they consider one foot in a banana peel and the other in the graveyard, and they know that there's not much money they can make off those customers. And I'll give you an example of that in the Nabisco. Now, Nabisco at one time was producing a product called Crown Pilot crackers, and this was a product that went all the way back to the early 1900s, and they produced this product for many years, up until I think about 2006, 2007. And the reason why they stopped producing it was because they said that the median age of the customer was 60. And because the median age of the customer was 60, there was no place else for them to take the product or to reach new customers with the product, because all the people who grew up with the product, they were now senior citizens. So there was no place else to really go with that product. The same thing happened to another Nabisco product called Royal Lunch milk crackers. Now, Royal Lunch milk crackers, they also were produced in the early 1900s, and they were produced up until about 2006 or 2007 as well. And they simply stopped producing them because, again, the median age was 60 to 65. In comics right now at 45, that's a median age that companies, they just don't like, because, again, 45, that's, again, one foot in the banana peel, the other in the grave, and they can't afford to take that product and expand it to more audiences. And with what they did to Star Wars, they really, again, did damage to that brand. And they really messed that brand up, because that brand could have expanded had they did that new trilogy right. But what they did was they wanted to push that identity politics into Star Wars, and that's what derailed it. And that's what's also derailing Marvel right now, because the big problem at Marvel, again, is they have no publishing professional to really guide it. And these people, they want to go out and, instead of hiring talented professionals like I've seen on the indie scene, they are going out here and hiring a bunch of SJWs who, again, also have no publishing experience. And a lot of these people don't even have really serious writing credits. A lot of these people they hire, they get them off of Tumblr or they get them out of YA. And when they get them out of YA and Tumblr, a lot of these people, they don't understand how the business of publishing works. So that's why the comics are so bad coming out of Marvel right now. And that's why sales have dropped over 90%. And with those sales numbers dropping, what's been happening is we've seen a lot of comic shops closing over the last couple of years. And yeah, a dude's thoughts, yeah, they are pushing that LGBTQ and SJW. And most customers don't want that product, because what most people don't understand is the LGBTQ community, yes, they have a lot of mouth, but they are only less than 0.5% of the population. So you have publishers trying to sell products to a population that is extremely small, and products that are only being distributed to small places. So I'm looking at that, and you're trying to sell a product, but you're selling it in a venue, one, that is very limited because comic shops, and two, you're trying to sell it to a population that is very small and doesn't go out there. So I'm looking at it and going, they're not out there. And SJWs really don't buy comics. So most SJWs, what they want to do is they'll pirate their comics on websites and read them that way, but they're not going to spend any money. That's good. That's right, Benici. They don't spend money. And the audiences they want to target right now, like the audiences they want to go after, minority audiences and stuff like that, they're very small. So I'm sitting there going, you're trying to mass market characters to large audiences, and you're trying to throw them at them, and instead of trying to market them in a way that makes them appealing. I mean, you have to look at the audience again for who you're trying to sell to, and you also have to look at your core base. And one of the big things that messed up the comic book industry over the last, I say, 4 or 5 years with this SJW stuff is they've alienated their white male customer base, because the core customer base for comics is white males. And without that core customer base, you can't really branch out to other customer bases, because in business, it's like this. You need to have a core customer base in order to sell your products. And it's that core base that allows you to go out here and expand. But with the SJW business model, they want to go out here and market to these smaller audiences. Unfortunately, the smaller audiences just don't have the spending power that the white male customer base does. Now, as someone who knows about the core white male customer base, I know that these are guys who used to spend $200 to $300 every Wednesday in a comic shop just on comics alone. And then when you start coming in and start talking about action figures and video games, that's when you start seeing these guys starting to spend in the thousands of dollars. So when it comes down to your white males, they are a huge customer base, and they are money in the bank for any comic publishing house. I mean, if you really want to make money, you need to get that core customer base. And Marvel right now, they're not really focused on that customer base, and that's why they're losing money. I've known about that customer base ever since I got into really serious about comics in the late 80s, when I first went to my first Comic-Con, where it was 90% white guys, and me and my brother were the only 2 black people in the room. That's how it was. But the industry right now, they're not really focused on that core base. They are all into this whole identity politics and trying to reach customers in places that just aren't there. I mean, comics primarily, again, are distributed in comic shops. In comic shops, there aren't that many of them now, because the Heroes World distribution led to the collapse of the comic shop, where we lost 50% of our shops in the 90s, and we continue to lose shops right now. So you've got people trying to sell comics to customers that aren't there, and in places where the customer doesn't go. Now, that's another big problem that has led to the complete decline of the comic book industry. and it's led to a lot of big problems as related to the business model. That's right, Benny G. The SJW will blame white men for everything, but white men don't go out and buy comics that don't feature characters relating to them. That when it comes down to them, they want to see stories that relates to their experience and their ideas. So they want to see what they call apolitical stories, which feature a lot of action and adventure. So I believe, again, yeah, that's right, Spore Hacker. Hi, glad to see you. We are in the last days of the comic book industry. That's what I see right now, is we're in the last days of this business, because we're heading to the point where it's becoming unsustainable. And I have to agree with guys like Diversity in Comics and Umbrella Guy, who have come out and just shown you the numbers, because I saw this problem coming about 8 years ago. And it is an evening in Germany, Spore Hacker. It's morning here in the Bronx. But 8 years ago, I saw the problems coming, and the sad part is no one in the business really wanted to do anything about the problems as related to the business. And because no one wanted to do anything about the business, that's why things have fallen apart. Because I looked at the whole picture of it, and I said that, yeah, it is. It is evening in Holland, Spore Hacker. It's all the way over there. I mean, I'm here in New York, and it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, but they haven't done anything, and they could have done something about this 8 years ago, but they didn't do anything. I mean, Marvel and DC, they were so caught up in hiring the wrong people, and those wrong people have led to their complete decline as a business. And the reason why it's been in decline is because they just haven't been able to really understand how publishing works. I mean, things like the New 52, that was like, the DC was in decline, but the New 52 really took them into free fall, because one, they had cut off the connection for all the old books and the history of the old books, and told everybody that wasn't relevant. And then they wound up alienating people over there. And then they went on to continue to alienate people. And yeah, the New 52 was just a complete disaster, and it just derailed DC Comics. Not only derailed DC Comics comics publication brand, it also derailed their merchandising brand, because I was collecting DC Universe Classics at the time, and DC Universe Classics was selling like hotcakes, and then all of a sudden they decided to go New 52, and the entire line just completely collapsed. I mean, you couldn't move DC merchandise, and you still can't move it. I still see it sitting on Walmart store shelves. Sup, Mac and D's. I still see it sitting there to this day, and right now it's just a complete mess. I mean, Dan Dido really and Warner Brothers just totally derailed DC. DC had some fairly strong momentum until 2002, when he decided to come in and start implementing those ideas. And again, that's what really derailed the DC side of the comic book industry. The Marvel side was in trouble in 2001, again, from Joe Quesada, and the inability to understand how to transition from one team to a creative team to another. And because they can't transition, that's what leads to all the reboots at Marvel. And DC's problem is just Dan Dido. I wish they would just fire that man already, because he is extremely incompetent. Thanks to him, the DC brand has not really been able to build up any momentum overall. Hey, G. Woodward. And that's what Lucasfilm has really messed up Star Wars. Yep, a dude's thoughts. They have to learn how to market and serve the long-term customer, and that's target marketing. That's what I talk about, and what I did with the Spinsterella trilogy. Because when I came out with Spinsterella in 2015, I then followed it up with Spellbound in 2016. And again, I reached out to the goth subculture and the people in the goth subculture. I reached out to goth customers, and that book was actually more successful than Spinsterella, because when people in the subculture were hearing that I was making an African-American goth heroine, they went out and told more people about the book. So people came out because I started promoting the character, Matilda Crowley, in Spinsterella, and I started promoting to people in the subculture. And that's something we're not seeing being done in the comic book industry. We're not seeing that type of marketing where you have your source audience, your target audience. We're not seeing people trying to reach customer bases. We're not even seeing any sort of planning right now. I mean, I look at some of the books Diversity in Comics has in his videos. I've looked at them myself, and I'm like, again, who are you targeting this book to? What audience are you talking about? Milestone? I haven't heard anything about Milestone coming back. But boy, they have talked about that and announced it, but I have yet to see one book ever come out. Overall, I have not seen one book come out from Milestone. They keep saying it's coming back, but we haven't seen it overall. I mean, just have not seen it at all. And they keep talking about Milestone, but I have not heard a thing about it. I mean, if Milestone was to come out, I would buy all the books again. I have all of the Milestone #1 issues in my collection, but I would go out and buy those if they brought them back. But the problem is just that they keep announcing it, but we've yet to see one book being released. And I grew up on comics myself, Dark Soul. I grew up on a lot of comics. Ever since I was 4 years old, I grew up with them. And that's one of the things that just saddens me to see this complete decline, because we are, again, in the last days of the comic book industry as I see it. There's just no way that the business can sustain itself, because you just don't have enough readers out here to go out here and buy those titles. And the titles that are out there, they're just so filled with identity politics, because you have so many grossly unqualified people working in the industry, and they're working in the industry because they're there because they have certain political views. They have certain political ideas. They don't have any sort of plan. Oh yeah, I see that myself, Raja. I see that with wrestling now, because I remember last week I was watching that whole thing with the John Cena, and that was really annoying. This whole thing where they totally cucked John Cena, and they had it where it was just awful to watch. I mean, there's no need to put this identity politics into stories. There's no need to put that type of thing into stories, because we clearly see that the customers are alienated. When I look at, thank you, Miracle Mark. Sana Amanat's trying to turn it into a lifestyle brand. And when you hear that word lifestyle brand, what I want everybody to understand is that means they want to make it a woman's brand. And that's what lifestyle brand means. It means they want to make the brand targeted to women. But unfortunately, superheroes were always targeted towards men. And this is why Sana Amanat's going to fail miserably. Superhero comics are for men. They're not for women. And if you want to do, comics featuring heroines or that type of stuff, you have to really understand that your core audience is going to be men if you're doing comics, and you need to really find books that appeal to both men and women if you want to do it. But when you hear lifestyle brand, that's for women. I've heard that term used for Cosmopolitan. I've heard that term used for Women's Day. I've heard that term used for stuff like Sex and the City. So when you hear that type of word, that's what that means. And if she's trying to turn it into a lifestyle brand, it's not going to work, because it's just not what the comic audience has ever been. I've been in, again, this business ever since I was a kid, and I've been to Comic-Con since the late 80s, and the core base has always been men. And usually it's those men who usually go to Comic-Cons. And when I went to New York Comic-Con about a year ago with my brother, it was women it was not women, but men who brought their girlfriends and men who brought their sons. And when I would go to different booths, it would be fathers and sons at the cons. So that's always been the core base there. If you want to sell products to women, you have to sell things like romance novels, like a Spinsterella. This sells primarily to women, and that's because it's got this type of story and story model that they like. And this is another mistake that your Sana Amanat makes, is trying to sell female products to a male base and then try to sell them a product with a oh, that's okay, Writer 197. That's okay. But they want to sell they want to sell these products to a male customer base, and it turns off that male customer base. And the male customer base, what they want is action and adventure. They don't want a lot of politics in there. They just want their stories to be straightforward. They want good guys and bad guys. And that's what the customer wants. But because Sana Amanat wants to go out here and push her identity politics and her lifestyle of identity politics, that's what's leading to Marvel having that 90% drop in sales. She wants to push this agenda of identity politics on the customer, and that's not what the customer wants. Now, when I go out here with the SJS Direct books, like the ISIS series, what I want to do is give the customer what they want. They want stuff like this. They want the action and adventure, and that's what I want to give them in the upcoming graphic novel. And they want stuff like this. They want the action and adventure on the cover. They want to see this on the cover, and they want to see this type of content. They want action and adventure, and they're not getting that. Now, that's the big problem one of the big problems at Marvel right now, is that you're trying to give a customer something they don't want. And the other thing that the customer wants is they want that escape. They want to be able to get away from their problems. I mean, when I used to read comics, when I was in junior high school and high school, the reason why I would read comics is because I want to take a minute to get away from my life and my problems and just be able to get a break from things. And people, they're just not getting that break from things. They're problems, because here we have this SJW. What they want to do is throw another problem in your face, scream at you with those problems, and that's something that the customer looks at and says, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to have somebody screaming and yelling at me about this problem going on in the world. I came here to watch superheroes beat up bad guys. I came here to see Spider-Man taking on Dr. Octopus. I came here to see Wolverine fighting Sabretooth. I came here for the customer they came here to get away from their problems. I mean, when women buy a romance novel, they want to see a muscular man seducing a very attractive woman, because that's what takes them out of their world. And the male comic reader, they want to go see this hero overcoming challenges, because that takes them out of their world. And that's why comics can't attract people, because they want to bring you problems. And the fastest way to lose a customer is to give them a problem. What you want to do is either give them an escape, or after you give them the escape, then give them a solution they can come back to in their personal life. So that's something you really want to do. And that's how, yeah, that's right, Spore Hacker. That's how they really failed at attracting the younger generations, because they just don't know how to reach those customers. I mean, they really don't talk to them. They don't really understand them. They don't really relate to them, and they don't really give them what they want to see. I mean, I look at a lot of comics today, and they don't really give you those stories that relate to people's experiences today. I remember just I wonder if any of these creators even go outside to really see the world out here and see what people are going through, because I go out here every day, and when I try to write stories, I try to bring what I see out in the real world into my stories. For example, I did a story called Esteem Little Girl Lost, where I really made a commentary about how a lot of kids feel left out because they're out of their parents' lives, because their parents don't have time for them. And then in between those stories, in that story, I talked about how this child was being lost due to her family being so busy focused on work. And in between, I also talked about, how crazy Times Square was and how dangerous Times Square was because I had gone to Times Square to go take a family member's package down to the Toys R Us at the time to bring it over there so it can be shipped. And I saw the topless women. I saw the guys in the suits with the pictures. And I drew on that to tell the story that I wanted to tell. And it was one of the most successful E-Steam series books on Smashwords. People shared it. People were always passing links to it. And the reason why is because it came from real life experience. And when I look at a lot of the writers who are doing SJW books, hello, Tim Drake, they are not really drawing from any sort of life experience or trying to draw from things that they know, because that's a skill that a writer has, is drawing from what they know, because you can feel what they know and see it on the page. And when I look at these writers, a lot of the SJW writers, they really don't know much about life. It's like reading something from my 20s. Hey, Gabriel. He's a longtime viewer of my channel. He also talks to me on Facebook. But when I look at these SJW books, they really remind me a lot of stuff that I read in my 20s. I mean, when I wrote in my 20s, it was just based on stuff that I thought I knew about life, but it wasn't until I really started experiencing life that I started looking at it and going, this is really garbage, because you're not coming from a place of objectivity. It's just all emotional writing. Yeah, Gabe, I did see the Spider-Man Homecoming trailer, and oh my goodness, that Spider-Man trailer, what that reminded me of was Agent Cody Banks. I was looking at that Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, and it reminded me of Agent Cody Banks. It was just so dumbed down and so childish. It just wasn't funny. It was a terrible, terrible trailer. And then they had to infuse it with the identity politics. But that whole trailer proved my point that I don't really need to see Avengers Endgame, because we all know everything is just going to go back to normal. So that's the start. Well, Spider-Man Homecoming was the start of SJW MCU. And I'm looking at the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, and yeah, SJW MCU is in full swing. I mean, we're in SJW MCU era, and that's where we are right now. So that's where we're going to be after Endgame. So that's the end of the MCU as I see it. And these SJW books, they're some of the worst things ever written, because again, the writers really are not coming from any sort of life experience. They're not really coming from any sort of understanding of the world. They're not really coming from a place of really understanding. Oh, thank you, Rodney Holmes. Any understanding of life. They've not really experienced any sort of life outside of their parents' home. And it's clear from what I see on the page. What I see on the page of an SJW book is not a story of someone who understands how the world works. Because I would sit there and I would look at books like your X-23s, your She-Hulks, and I would just sit there and I would just look at it and go, this is ridiculous. And I listened to some of the dialogue in the book, like with Captain Marvel #1. I was after I did the review of that, and that's up on the channel. I read that book. I said, nobody talks like that. And I had to sit there and wonder, as a guy who's been writing for over 25 years, have any of these writers just done what I do when I write a book? So one of the things I do to make my dialogue really stand out is I read the entire sequence to make sure that it sounds like something somebody would say. And I would sit there and just read it through, because if you just read it aloud, you'll read it and go, that doesn't sound like something somebody would say. And that's what I would do to go out here. And before I even publish a book, with every book that I do, whether it be an ISIS series book or an E-Steam series book or a novel like Spinsterella, I would sit there and I would read the dialogue. I would even read the prose aloud. And that would give me a sense of how the story would flow in the reader's imagination. So when I would sit there and read it aloud, it would give me a sense of how it would flow. And if the words weren't flowing right, what I would do is I would correct the phrases if I was changing words. Oh, thank you, Spore Hacker. And I would go and read my dialogue, and that's something a writer has to do. You have to come in here and read what you write so that the reader doesn't have to sit there and go, that dialogue makes absolutely no sense. And they're not Miracle Mark. The ISIS series books aren't comic books. ISIS series books are prose books, but I'm getting ready to do an Indiegogo where I published the first ISIS graphic novel, and the first ISIS graphic novel is going to be an adaptation of this ISIS series book that is now available in paperback, but you can pre-order in Kindle, All That Glitters. I'm going to be doing an adaptation of the book, and it's going to, if I can get it funded, it's going to feature Bill Walko's art, which is featured on the cover. That's what's going to be in the interior, and I'm hoping that we can get funded. I'm going to be launching that in March, around the week of the launch of Captain Marvel, because I want to launch it then, because everybody always complains about Captain Marvel, and I want to show people that there is an alternative to Captain Marvel, that there is somebody out here who is producing a heroine who is balanced, and a story that features a heroine that is out here being strong and powerful, but is also friendly and feminine. With The Goddess Next Door, I want to be able to give you a fun character, and I want to be able to show you how a story model with a heroine works. With this ISIS graphic novel, I want to give you that alternative, because everybody always talks about, these SJW heroes like Kamala Khan, Squirrel Girl, Captain Marvel, and I want to show you a story where I show you a heroine being strong and powerful, but also being soft and feminine at the same time. So that's what I want to do with the ISIS graphic novel. Oh, I've heard about the Joker movie, and if they start talking about Trump, that's a pass for me. I'm not going to sit there through identity politics and have people taking jabs and shots, at politicians. That's not what I come here for. When I watch a superhero movie, again, it's supposed to be an escape, and I might do one. I have to do more research on the manga business, but when I look at the manga business, it reminds me a lot of trade publishing, because in trade publishing, it's, again, you have to, before you even propose a concept to someone, you have to go out here and have a core audience that you're going for, and you have to be able to have a target for what you want to do in manga, because not manga, but in trade publishing, because that's where I think manga does. I think manga, when they go out here, before they even, greenlight a book, they have a plan for who they want to sell to, and where they want to sell it, and how they want to sell it. So they usually, again, even when they start, even before they greenlight the book, they say, yeah, I want this writer for this concept. I want this artist on this concept, and I want to reach this audience with this product. So when I look at trade publishing, that's what they want to do, and that's what I see manga doing, because with manga, it looks like they say, hey, we want to reach these kids with Pokemon. Well, we need to have certain story elements, and we need to have certain art, and we also have to have a business plan for where we want to go. So they usually plan that months in advance, and that's something I do myself when I go out here and launch a book. Usually that's why you see those ads in front of all my videos, usually like 90 to 60 days before I launch a book, because what I want to do is start getting that idea in people's heads that this book is coming. I want to build that anticipation. And yeah, publishing is a very long game. It's a marathon. And one of the big problems with Marvel and DC right now in American comics is they keep trying to sprint. And the reason why they sprint is primarily because a lot of these companies, what they want to do is they think it's still like the 90s, where you could go out here and launch a book and people are going to buy hundreds of thousands of copies. A lot of them still think it's the days of Spawn #1 at Image Comics and Spider-Man #1 from Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee's X-Men. So they're still thinking that the business runs like that. But that's never really been how the business ever ran for publishing. And publishing has always been like this. It's always been a slow thing. It's like I'll launch a book, and because I've seen this myself with Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, I launched that book in 2014, and I didn't start really seeing sales on it until about 2015 or 2016. And it's a slow thing. It's very slow because customers it takes time for them to find a book, discover a book, and it takes time for you to really build momentum on a book. So you may start out a book really slow. If you're a publisher, it may not get readers until much later on. And sometimes it may take 2 to 3 years for a book to get an audience. So it may take a good long time for a book to really find its audience. And usually what most publishers would do is they would take 24 to 36 months to see if the book could start to build momentum. But at the 24, 36 part, this is where Marvel cancels books and literally kills the momentum of that book. And I've seen that done so many times with books that were just starting to really get some legs. And that's what really destroys Marvel's long-term sales. And it also killed the entire Superman line over at DC because Jurgens and Tomasi had finally gotten Superman back on track with Rebirth. And then you had books like Super Thousands, which is really low as trade publishing. But when you look at it, the momentum could have gone on to 50 or 60,000. I'm not going to really see glass, Benny, because it's not my thing. But the books were getting strong momentum, and they wound up killing that momentum with Brian Michael Bendis. He came in here and destroyed all of Super Son's momentum, and he destroyed all the momentum for all the Superman books. I remember hearing people saying good things about Superman, and the book was starting to generate what the book needed to generate. And this is something, again, your Dan Dido doesn't understand, and this is what your Sana Amanat doesn't understand about publishing. A publishing professional like myself, I understand about momentum, and I understand that it takes, in order for that book to build momentum, you have to just let those creators just create. Just give them the space, let them go. And that's what they did to David Michelini and Bob Layton on Iron Man, and that's what they did for Chris Claremont and John Byrne on the X-Men. And that's why those books are considered icons. Yeah, I've heard about Bendis on Young Justice, and I read Young Justice, and that is a horrifically bad book. And to think he killed Super Sons to get to this, and that's what was really sad. You had a book that was generating strong momentum, was in the 40,000s, and could have gone to the 50 or 60,000s by the end of the year of 2018, but he wound up killing that book's momentum by canceling it and then bringing Brian Michael Bendis in. And when I look at Brian Michael Bendis, he has not been good ever since his Daredevil run finished. I mean, he's been trying to write other books, and all he does is he kills the momentum on all those books. I mean, his New Avengers was a mess. His Iron Man, he clearly showed that he had no skills whatsoever. And I mean, if I'm an editor and I'm looking at his Iron Man numbers, I would not have hired him. I mean, Dan Dido, as I saw it, that was a boneheaded move to hire Bendis when you see him literally destroying Iron Man in front of us by featuring this new character, Riri Williams, who readers hate. And she's the center focus of the book. And that was a mistake as I saw it. It's like, you don't recruit this guy. He doesn't have the sales numbers. Yes, he gets a lot of controversy, but he doesn't really get the sales numbers. He does not get the sales numbers. He does not generate the customer base the way you want it. And that's something that you have to think about from a business perspective. And a publishing pro is going to think about that from a business perspective. J.O. West, John Kent probably isn't on a Titans team because Dan Dido doesn't want to put him there. what the big problem with Dan Dido is he doesn't like legacy characters, and because he doesn't like legacy characters, he goes out of his way to destroy them, and that's why he murdered Wally West in Heroes in Crisis, and that's why he's just literally destroyed all of the characters in Titans, and that's why you don't see John Kent on a Titans team. That's why you don't see a lot of these characters, because he just doesn't like them. And again, that's not what a professional does. A professional does what the market wants, and because they want to support the customer and keep the customer coming in, they're going to continue pushing the characters that they want. An example of that, I did myself. I mean, back in about 2011, I believe, I launched this character, Nikki Desmond, on All About Nikki on Smashwords in a free ebook, and people liked that character. So I went out and my way to push that character more. And another character that I found that my customers liked was Esteem. So I did this story called Esteem No Good Deed, and that book got over 3,000 downloads in 2 months. So after I saw that the book was doing well, I decided to launch the Esteem series and continue to push the character, because I wanted to give the customers what they wanted. And the book I did after that, Demons Anonymous, that book got over 1,000 downloads on Smashwords, and that was just for the free version. Because people like the character. And when you have characters you give that people like, you give people more of that character. And I did the same thing last year with John Haynes. People were asking me for John Haynes' book for the longest, and I decided to finally give them a Conversation with Death story, and that book really sold. I mean, once I put the Mike Williams cover on there, it really started that book to sell really strong. So when you have a book that people like, you go out and give people more of that book. And that's what I want to do with John Haynes this year with the Dark Succubus book. And that's why I'm working on The Man with Nothing to Lose. So when you have products that are selling, you give customers more of those products. If you have a product that's not selling, you give people less of that product. Usually, if a product doesn't sell, you just stop producing that product overall. So I go where what the customer asks me to give them, and if they ask for more, I give you more. But if you don't ask for any more, I won't give you any more. Yeah, they could have used legacy characters to sell John Kent, but again, Dan Dido, he's just so caught up in what he wants. He wants to give us a dude's thoughts. He wants to give us his Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, and he wants to turn DC into Marvel. So I'm sitting there saying that's not what how many books are in the John Haynes series? The John Haynes series just started, and The Conversation with Death is the first book in the series. But before the series started, the first book featuring John Haynes is The Temptation of John Haynes, and the second book is The Man Who Rules the World. So if you want to start John Haynes, you can start with The Temptation of John Haynes, and then you can follow up with The Man Who Rules the World. So that's the entry point for John Haynes. But with the SJS Direct universe, all the books are entry points. And usually in the back of every SJS Direct book, I show you how everything starts. So like in the ISIS series books, I show you in the back matter where everything just starts. So you can see the serial timeline of how all the books go. So this is how all the books go if you want to follow the whole ISIS storyline. So you can just see it in the back, and it's also in the back of the Kindle books as well. So that's how you can follow it. It's very easy to follow, and you can just pick up any book in the series. And I've had people come in on certain books like Isis, All About the Goddess, and come in from there, which was the last book of the first story arc, or they've come in from books like Isis. There was another Isis book they used to come in on. The Bride of Dracula. They come in on Bride of Dracula all the time. I mean, Bride of Dracula, people constantly come in on that book, and that's their entry point. And with entry points, usually I let the readers choose the entry point. I don't tell the readers usually in most cases where to start, but they usually figure out things very quickly. I mean, last month I had somebody pick up the entire run on the ISIS series just from one book, and that's how solid the continuity in the SJS Direct universe is, because people, they can go back and they can go forward, and one of the reasons why they can do that is because of the way I structured things as related to continuity. And I learned all that, again, from old school Marvel comics. Cyborg on Doom Patrol, yeah, I saw that costume, Dark Soul, and that costume, it looks like something that you would get out of Target, and that's how bad that costume looks. And I'm sitting there scratching my head wondering, why is Cyborg on the Doom Patrol when Cyborg has always been a Teen Titan? And that's just something that just makes me shake my head. I sit there and go, how is he on the Doom Patrol when he's always been a Titan? And that's always been core to his story. His story has always been heavily connected to the Teen Titans. I mean, I have Teen Titans #1. I have DC Comics Presents issue with the first appearance of this character. And I read Tales of the Teen Titans #1, which featured Cyborg, and his history is tied to Teen Titans. So when I look at him on that show, that's an aberration that just makes me scratch my head, because it doesn't fit organically. And yeah, Beast Boy should be there because, yeah, he was a part of the Doom Patrol, and that would fit more organically into the series. But they have everything all mixed up. I mean, Beast Boy should not be on the Titans. I guess they put him in that adaptation because, yeah, Miracle Mark, they tried to shoehorn him into the Justice League on New 52 for diversity because it was allegedly too white, but it just didn't work. I mean, he's a Titan, plain and simple. I mean, as someone who has most of the old New Teen Titans books from the Wolfman Perez run in his comic collection, you cannot have Cyborg and then not tie him with Titans. That's just who he is. That's core to who he is. And that's core to his character. And everybody's attempt to try to shoehorn him in places he doesn't belong doesn't work. I mean, yeah, Beast Boy is Doom Patrol, and that's why he was wearing the red and white costume in New Teen Titans. It was a homage to the Doom Patrol. And, the Teen Titans show, I have not seen it, but from what I've seen, I wasn't happy with it. I mean, the Hooker Starfire, the Robin who kills, that stuff is just completely out of character for Teen Titans. It's just not who they are. One moment. No, I just got to knock on the door. All right. Sorry, I had something to take care of. But it was core to the Cyborg is core to the Teen Titans. So that's a good question, Miracle Mark. That's a good question. Martian Manhunter did take the form of a black man in Supergirl, and that would have been a great way to put him into the Justice League. But again, the people at DC probably thought that would be racist, but they didn't understand that Justice League, again, is core, and everybody who knows Justice League knows it's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter. That's usually the core of the Justice League, and the Flash. That's the core 7. So I didn't really get the whole thing with Cyborg. It just threw the whole book off, and it derailed. It was one of the reasons why people were just so turned off by the New 52, because the New 52 was just a slap in the face to comic fans overall. Most comic fans, we were just insulted by it. Yeah, Starfire looks like a hooker. You just need to go look at the photos of Starfire. I mean, this was a very attractive sister, who was playing Starfire, but because of the way they dressed her in that outfit, that's what makes her unappealing to people, because the dress she has on looks like something straight out of Times Square agent badass. That's what makes her really a turnoff to people. Doomsday Clock, I thought it would be a chance to really fix the DC universe. I thought it was going to lead to the promise of the classic DC universe coming back. And I thought that Doomsday Clock would eventually lead to that direction for the DC Universe Classic coming back. Unfortunately, because Dan Dido is in charge, it doesn't look like we're going to be headed back to the classic DC Universe everyone wants to return. And because it doesn't look that way, that's why a lot of people are walking away from DC Comics right now. When they look at stuff like what Tom King did with Batman, they're looking at Heroes in Crisis, and that's what made people really walk away from DC right now. They walked away because they're not seeing that momentum headed towards that return, because it was that was the core reason I believe many people were buying the books for Rebirth, was they thought that Rebirth would eventually lead to the return of the classic DC universe. They made Hooker Starfire that way because Greg Berlanti has an issue with black people, Mac and D's. They really hate, Greg Berlanti hates black people, and he tries to find ways to passive-aggressively take jabs at black people every time he puts on one of his shows. Because I remember watching even that event that they did this year, and he made a passive-aggressive jab at black men with John Diggle once again. And he did that in many of his shows, from the Arrow, where he's always got John Diggle as the butler and the bumbling, stumbling Mr. Terrific, to the Flash, where we got these asexual Wally West and the asexual Firestorm. And then we had the Supergirl, where we got the emasculated Jimmy Olsen, who became the guardian of the friend zone, to Riverdale, where we have Chuck Clayton as the Black Brute. So this is par for the course as it relates to Greg Berlanti. He just has a real serious issue with black people. And that's just the way he does things. He always finds ways to take shots at black people, and he has a real serious issue with black men. He just does not like black men. And yeah, Guardian of the Friend Zone is what is a joke that I made regarding the Black James Olsen on Supergirl, Rudy Dog. That's a joke that I've made. I even made a meme about it because they had a picture of him, and that's what he is. He was originally supposed to be Kara's love interest, but because some racist white comic fans didn't like it, what happened was they then turned him into the Guardian of the Friend Zone. And when you see him in the costume, he looks like a white knight. So that's where the joke came in about Guardian of the Friend Zone. So that's what he is right now, just a complete joke. And yeah, I'm not a fan of Heroes in Crisis. It's just an absolutely terrible event. If anything, it just destroyed, along with the end of the Jurgens Tomasi Superman and the cancellation of Super Sons, it literally derailed DC's momentum. I mean, that Heroes in Crisis is the equivalent of what Identity Crisis was back in the early 2000s. It was the story event that wound up alienating fans. And this Heroes in Crisis came right out after Batman 50, where we got the end of where Selena walked away from Bruce at the wedding. And all of this was the start of DC's real serious decline. And now DC, as I see it, is headed towards the same bad road that your SJW Marvel is on right now. So Miracle Mark, there's not always a crisis in DC. There's just something that they do to try to get sales up, because people like Dan Dido don't know how to market comics, and they don't know how to reach audiences. So they come up with these gimmicks to try to reach readers, but all they do is wind up alienating them. Now, the original Crisis of Infinite Earths by Marv Wolfman and George Perez what that was meant to do was meant to adjust the continuity to make it easy to read. But what happened was they started doing this as a desperate move to try to get new readers with this identity crisis, infinite crisis, and it just frustrated people and led to people walking away from DC Comics. There was only one crisis they needed, and it was Infinite Earths, and that was it. So it's just become a complete mess ever since, and that's due to the mismanagement of Marvel under Dan Dido's completely incompetent leadership. As I see it, the event story model, it just needs to end, because the event story model was something that came out of the 80s. It doesn't need to be in the 21st century. Right? We need right now in today's 21st century market is to allow these characters to grow and allow these characters to develop in their own books. We need to let these characters be just grow organically and just let them grow, because events, as I see it, impede character growth. Now, when I do events in SJS Direct, like Eastteam Ascension or Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, they are organic events, and you really don't really see too much happening with them. Usually when I do an event like Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, that was Isis's first meeting with John Haynes, and that was building up in both the Isis and Eastteam series. And with Eastteam Ascension, things were building up ever since the end of Temptation of John Haynes, and we saw like a preview of it in Man Who Rules the World, of her trying to get new powers. That was me testing it out to see if the audience would like to see Eastteam with new powers. And after Man Who Rules the World, I found out that readers liked seeing her with new powers, so I gave her the new powers in Eastteam Ascension. So that's how I do events. They are like organic in the story, in that it's a major turning point for a character. And because it's organic, you don't really get too upset about things. But with these event stories that come every 3 months at Marvel, or they come every couple of months in DC, what they do is they drive the readers away, because we know that all of this is going to be undone in 3 to 6 months by another writer. So it doesn't have that emotional impact. And that's something that I learned from reading older Marvel comics before events came, this marketing thing. Now, originally they were meant to sell lower tier books and get people into lower tier books that weren't selling as well. But today it's just used as a gimmick, and it just doesn't work, because nobody's going to buy 100 books just to read one story. Captain Black Cheesemo, he's a part of Gen Z. I don't think the big two will reach your generation, because with the state of the industry right now in free fall, as I see it, what's going to happen is Gen Z, your comics are going to come from independent creators like myself, people like Ethan Van Sciver, people like Richard C. Meyer, people like Josh Howard. They're going to be the people who make the comics for Gen Z and later on in the 21st century, because with the state of the industry being in such bad shape right now, that's where it's going to come from America. But as it relates to Gen Z, the core of their comic base is going to be manga. So it's going to come either from indie creators like myself, as from the American base, but manga is going to pretty much have the marketplace as I see it, because they really have a better business structure. They have a better business model. They have a better understanding of the publishing industry, and they have better understanding of marketing. So when they come out here, they make a lot of good books, and they are able to reach audiences. I don't know about Archie. Archie has always been, kind of middle of the road, but the books they have been making lately have been very good, but I just don't know how they're going to keep things going. I mean, I felt that they shouldn't have really rebooted, but they did. But the books they're producing have been fairly solid, so I don't really have a problem with Archie. I like the Archie reboot. I thought it was a good, strong story arc, a good story platform, and they have been producing some really solid books over the last couple of years. But the state of the American comic book industry for Gen Z is definitely going to be manga and American independent creators. I don't see Marvel and DC as being big competitors in the future comic book industry. I don't really see it staying with that type of staying power, because the people running it just don't understand how publishing houses work. They don't understand how to market to customers. They don't know how to really even treat customers. I mean, I doubt any manga company would allow somebody who took a picture of somebody's anus to work for them, or for people to say all sorts of egregious things like I've seen on social media. I mean, I saw a tweet from Gail Simone, which I found to make me shake my head. They wouldn't allow those people to work for them because they have professional standards on their businesses. And guys like Alternative Comics, he had professional standards, and people tried to harass him. But it was just wrong for those SJW pros, to so-called pros, to attack them, because the way Peter Simeti was running things is the way a business runs things. Peter Simeti is trying to run his business by saying, look, if you are working for me, I expect you to behave a certain way on social media. And he wants you to behave that way on social media because you are not just representing yourself, you are representing his products, and you are representing his company when you work for him. So I understood what Peter Simeti was doing by implementing that policy, because it's a policy I follow myself as an independent creator and as a publisher running the SJS Direct imprint. When I'm on social media, I try to keep it as professional as possible. When I'm on Twitter or I'm on Facebook, I usually spend most of my day posting up links to books. I may post up something on occasion, like saying I'm making hamburgers or I'm going out for pizza, or I may post something like, in the case of a government shutdown, I'll tell people that we the people have the choice to go out here and recall these candidates, something like that. But I would always try to keep it very professional, because I know that not only are my followers reading my tweets, but other people outside of there are reading my tweets and Facebook posts. And you don't want to go out here and alienate people by attacking other people online. You really want to have connections with others online, and you want to have a great relationship with people online. That's one of the reasons why I came to YouTube and Facebook, was so that, again, I could let people get to know me, so that they could get to know my products and have that positive relationship with me, so they would have the motivation to go out here and buy books that are a part of the SJS Direct imprint. Because when you're out here, again, you want to form a relationship with customers, and it's that relationship that allows you to generate sales. And this is something a lot of these so-called SJW comic pros don't really understand about the business, and that's why the business is dying, because they don't understand that you want to have that great relationship with your customers, so they'll go out here and buy more of your products. And that's one of those things you want to do out here, is go out here and have that relationship with those customers, so they can go out here and say, hey, that Sean James is a great guy. He's a cool dude. I'm going to go out here and pick up his ISIS series books, or I'm going to pick up some of his other books, like his nonfiction, like The Man Crisis. And I like him, so I'm going to buy his books. And that's something any good businessman is going to do. And when I look at these SJW comic pros, I just wonder where editorial is. I mean, any editor-in-chief is going to, again, pull these people to the side and say, look, you're hurting my business, you're hurting my brand, like Peter Simeti did. But when it comes down to, hey, Devon, they just don't do that. They don't really do anything. And they'll sit there and make an excuse and deflect by saying, oh, they're independent contractors. But as a business, they work for you. Whether they're freelance, they work for you. And what they do reflects on your business. And that's something, as a freelancer myself, I try to keep. That's why I try to keep it professional, because the way I act on a job is going to either get me more jobs or it's going to alienate people so they don't hire me. And this is something that your SJW Comic Pro doesn't understand, is that the way you behave on a job, the word of mouth out here, that's going to get you more jobs out here. And that's something they sit there and they're thinking, oh, I wrote all these nasty tweets or these Facebook posts, not understanding that you're creating a paper trail that alienates people, not only from the brands you work on, but also prevents you from getting other employment opportunities at other companies. And that's the other big problem with your SJW Comic Pro. They don't really think in the long term. All there is, they think about are their feelings, but they don't think about the long term of the business. I don't think I'm going to see Hellboy Devon. That's not a character I really know that well. So I don't really know that character, so I may not see that movie. So movies that I might be interested in, I might possibly again go see Avengers Endgame. I'm still not a fan of that movie after Infinity War, because I know how it's going to end. And Spider-Man Far From Home pretty much confirms everything that I saw regarding that. No, I'm not going to even bother with Captain Marvel, because I know it's just Starman 1984 repackaged with even worse cinematography, Miracle Mark. It's just absolutely terrible. I mean, if I saw it, it would probably be on a streaming service or on television. But Captain Marvel is a huge pass for me. But that's not a movie I would want to see, because I just don't like the identity politics that I believe they're going to push in that movie hard, because they believe that if you create a strong heroine, you have to make it like a man. And that's not what people want to see in a strong heroine. What they want to see in a strong heroine is like what I write in my ISIS books, or what I write in Spellbound about the woman having a strength of character. That's what people want to see. But Marvel doesn't want to give that to you. And they don't want to give it to you because they are convinced that they can shove their identity politics down your throat. And that's what the SJWs want to do. They want to shove their identity politics down your throat. Yeah, they should have made a Black Widow movie, Vic, but that doesn't fit within their agenda and their plans. Well, Star Trek 4, I didn't follow the Star Trek reboot. I haven't followed Star Trek since Deep Space Nine left. With Star Wars, I'm not Star Wars. Star Trek, I stopped around Voyager, middle of Voyager, because Voyager was just unwatchable. I mean, Voyager around season 3, season 4, it started to become mostly jargon, and there was no real story anymore. So that's when I stopped watching Star Trek Voyager. I mean, it just was unwatchable. Oh, hi, Libra Legend. I'm chilling. I'm making a live stream right now. I'm talking about the state of the comic book industry. And the reason why I was talking about the state of the comic book industry is because I believe we're in the last days of the comic book industry. And because we're in the last days, I believe that's why we're going to be getting some of the worst comics in the history of the business. And I believe that we are this close towards the end right now, because we have, again, grossly unqualified people working as editors. We have grossly unqualified people working as writers. We have grossly unqualified people working as artists. I mean, I look at some of the art right now and it's just painful. I mean, I looked at a Squirrel Girl and the art was it was horrific. The only thing worse than the art I saw in a Squirrel Girl book was one of these Kwanzaa books. It was called Black AF. I don't know which one of them, but this one was so bad. I mean, they had the Dookie Fingers guy. You had the guy with the wonky composition. And it was one of the worst things I ever saw. And it was just one of the worst things that I've ever seen. Oh, yeah, J.J. Abrams. Oh, and Rodney Holmes. Yeah, J.J. Abrams ruins everything. J.J. Abrams has been a wreck ever since the days of Felicity. I don't know how many of you saw this show in the 1990s. I think it came out in 98 or so. It was called Felicity. It starred Kerry Russell. And that was J.J. Abrams' first show on the WB. And on that show, he had a show that was going strong, and it was starting to build some momentum. But then in season 2, he decides to have Felicity have sex with this artist guy out of nowhere. He then has her cut her hair, and then the show falls completely apart. And ever since then, J.J. Abrams has been destroying shows left and right. He starts out strong, but then everything he does just falls apart. I mean, he did the same thing on Lost, where it started out strong and then fell apart. And now he's coming over to Star Trek, and then he wrecked that. He wrecked Star Wars. And he has a pattern of making things a complete mess. So when it comes down to J.J. Abrams, I know his history all the way back from Felicity back in the 90s. And I know that everything he touches just turns into ruin after a couple of sequels. He can't get past the second sequel, usually because he just does not know how to, finish a story. And this is something that really a seasoned writer knows how to do, is they know that, yes, you can set it up, but you have to pay it off. And the big problem with J.J. Abrams and Tom King from Batman is he's terrible at paying off. So when you're a writer, you have to know how to pay a story off. And when you pay a story off, you pay it off by giving the reader a big climax and a satisfying conclusion. So that's the problems with J.J. Abrams. And it's also the problems with your Tom King. When I look at Tom King's Batman and I look at his Mr. Miracle, he has a problem of paying off poorly, because I look at Batman 50, he set up this big wedding between Bruce and Selina. He got everybody excited about this, and then he did not give us that satisfying payoff that would have given us a reason to continue watching. Same thing with Tom King's Mr. Miracle, where he set up this big premise about whether or not Scott Free was dead, and then he didn't pay it off with the finish that would have gotten people excited for more Mr. Miracle stories. So when I look at those two, they are examples of something I learned way back when I was younger about setups and payoffs from reading Sid Field's Screenplay. It's a book I highly recommend for any aspiring writer, is Sid Field's Screenplay. And that book really taught me how you have to pay off. So you can't ask the audience to invest in a story for 90 to 120 minutes or 3 or 4 books or 5 or 6 books and then let them down. You have to let them leave excited. So this is something a writer has to do, is they have to get you excited for the book. They have to keep you so excited that when the book pays off, you're like, I want to buy more books. And that's something I try to do with my ISIS series books. Is like, I try to get you in and make you and pay the story off so that you want to come back for more for the next book or go back for the previous books. And that's something a writer has to do. And I'm not seeing that from a lot of these guys like Tom King or your J.J. Abrams or even some of these SJW creators. They are not really giving you that payoff that gets you in. Now, when I look at books like Kwanzer's Black AF, that's one of the worst things I have ever seen. I mean, I've tried to read them, but they're just unreadable. Kwanzer is one of those pro-blacks who's always talking about black people, and the thing is that he's trying to fit this narrative that is the black that's acceptable to white people, and that's why his books are always so terrible. They're not really black AF. They're just boring AF, and that's just the truth. They're just so bad it's not even funny. I'm thinking about seeing Shazam. That's a movie I liked from the trailer, and that's one I really would like to go see. I want to go see Aquaman. I just got to find the time because I'm still working on this John Haynes, A Man That Has Nothing to Lose, but I want to find some time to go see Aquaman. I just got to buy the time to go see it, Devon. Yeah, but when I look at Star Wars, yeah, J.J. Abrams is a part of the problem, And I'd have to say Roundhead Ryan Johnson is also another part of the problem. Ethan Van Sciver, on one of his videos, he talked about how Last Jedi was actually written before Force Awakens. So these plans were put in place years in advance with Star Wars. They were planning on going on this whole feminist narrative, and unfortunately it has not gone as the way Disney expected. And the reason why it didn't go that way is because, again, Star Wars, the mythos, they were very much one way. And the way they have really ruined all of these characters, it's really turned people away with this new trilogy, because the new trilogy isn't about what the original was. The original was about people of different races, different species, all coming together to fight this empire. And we're not, and in their attempt to try to, this new trilogy, all they want to do is push identity politics and not look at the reasons for why they had the war. The reason why they had the war was because these people all wanted to come together against this galactic empire, and we didn't really see those people coming together. Because if you look at the original trilogy, and I have watched the original trilogy at least about 2 or 3 times already in my lifetime. I've watched it 2 or 3 times minimum. It was about all these different people. They were all coming together, and we weren't seeing people always talking about their ethnicities. They weren't always talking about being victims. It wasn't always talking about about them being oppressed. It was people did their jobs, they did their part, and that was what made Star Wars great. It was like everybody did their part to overcome the empire, and everybody had their role. So you always had diversity in Star Wars. And that was one of the things that just makes me shake my head about Kathleen Kennedy, is her sitting there and saying that, Star Wars needed more diversity when Star Wars was always diverse. Same thing with Star Trek. I mean, Star Wars and Star Trek, you always got to see diversity. From the aliens to the crew members on the ship, you always got to see all sorts of people working together, and it pushed the idea that people could work together. And yeah, they destroyed Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi. That, I don't know who that was, but that wasn't the Luke I grew up with. The Luke I grew up with, again, always wanted to help people. He always cared about people, and he would not have blown off Rey. I mean, the Luke I knew would have cared about people, because that's why he wanted to leave Tatooine to go into the Flight Academy, and that's why he wanted to become a Jedi, and that's why he did not leave Darth Vader. He did not abandon Darth Vader. He wanted to redeem his father. That was one of the core reasons why he would do so much, because that's just not who he is. No, he definitely would not have had that snarky Elkston. He would not have had that snarky attitude. That's just not Luke. I mean, Luke, again, he was a farm boy. He was a nice guy. And that's not who he was. He was never like that. I mean, I would not have ever believed Luke to be that cynical. I always saw Luke growing up to become like Obi-Wan. I always saw him, because Obi-Wan was always optimistic and hopeful, and he always loved, as I saw it, Ben Kenobi. So he always wanted to honor him. So that's who I saw Luke growing into. I saw him growing into a man like Obi-Wan Kenobi. So that's what I wanted to see Luke become in his older years. So I look at this at Luke Skywalker. They took him completely out of character. I wanted to see him become just like Ben Kenobi. I wanted to see him become this guy who wanted to mentor this young boy, and a man who would have gone out of his way to mentor Rey. That's what I would have wanted to see from Luke. So I look at that other guy, Kylo Ren, and he's super beta. Sorry, I have to agree with you, Vic. He's a super beta. I don't see menace from him. He's just comically weak. I mean, everything with Kylo Ren is just, he was a wimp. He was no threat. And I don't see what they're going to do with him in episode 9. I think of episode 9 as it's going to be one gigantic disaster, because they're going to be pushing more feminism, more identity politics, and they're just going to make a complete disaster when Which one is stronger, Wonder Woman's sword or Trident and Neptune? I don't really know. I mean, Wonder Woman's sword is brand new, but Aquaman's Trident has been around for years. But neither character really needs those weapons. I mean, that's more of a Marvel thing. Thor needs a hammer. Captain America needs a shield. Usually, Wonder Woman, all she needs is her bracelets, and that's about it. But I don't see which those weapons having any sort of anything. They're more into they're more Marvel things. More Marvel, Thor and Captain America need those weapons, but DC characters, they usually don't. Ghostbusters 2016 was terrible. I was disappointed by that myself, Monica. I was really disappointed by that because, that movie totally tarnished the franchise. I mean, Ghostbusters, it was one of the all-time great comedies of the 80s. It was a great movie overall, and they wanted to again put the feminism and identity politics at play, and that's what led to Ghostbusters 2016 being a complete disaster. As someone who saw the original Ghostbusters and someone who actually owned almost all the Ghostbusters toys, I had to sell them about a year ago. I can tell you that the original Ghostbusters, that was one of the all-time great movies of the 80s, and this Ghostbusters 2016 pales in comparison to the comedy gold that the original was. The original was a masterpiece of comedy. Harold Ramis. Yeah, I remember the cartoon because I used to tape the cartoon back in the day. I used to tape the cartoon back in the 80s, and I also used to watch it on Saturday on ABC, and I also used to watch it on Fox, Channel 5 before it became Fox. It was like 3:30, 4 o'clock. This was when I was about 13 years old. And I used to watch Ghostbusters all the time. I mean, I had all the toys. I bought all the figures. I had all that stuff. I mean, all that stuff in my collection until about a year ago. And when I had to get rid of it to get ready to move, because I had to get rid of it in order to move. I mean, I had to get rid of I had the firehouse and everything. I tell you, I had it all. And that's how much I loved Real Ghostbusters. Real Ghostbusters, that was my show back in the late 80s when I was in high school. That was like the show I would take time for with that. I also have Filmation's Ghostbusters. I have that too. I have those DVDs as well. So both of those shows, they were a big part of my childhood. So they were a big part of my childhood, and those were two shows that I really would take time out to watch. I mean, again, I taped both Filmation's Ghostbusters and Real Ghostbusters, and when they had them out, I had the entire Ghostbusters collection. So that was another big part of my life in the 80s. I also like Voltron. That's another one that I really enjoy. And I have some Transformers. I have some G1s, but these days. Okay.
When your team's in flow, everything just moves. But when flow is broken.
Okay, that was an ad for something that popped up. But in the 80s, there was a really great time. There was all sorts of stuff, and I had quite a few of it. I gotta get it. I still have to get some stuff out to really get my display up. Because I still have Voltron. I have Voltron Deluxes from the 80s. Just have to get them up. Okay, I'm reading some more things. But yeah. Ghostbusters, that was one part of it. It was Voltron, Transformers, G.I. Joe. That they all came on Channel 11 here in New York, and I would always make time for them. But they came. When I was had them on eBay, I sold them for some pretty decent money. I mean, Firehouse went for about $100. The figures, they weren't in the best condition, but I was able to get some decent money for those. Real Ghostbusters toys. Ecto-1 got some pretty decent money, but I had to use all that money to prepare to move. So I couldn't take it all with me because it was just so much. The reason why G.I. Joe was like that with the explosions and everyone explosion was because back then they had these standards as related to violence. They couldn't really, in the 80s, show violence. So that's why everybody escaped, or they had the parachutes and they had the lasers, was because they didn't want kids to think that there was, blood and gore like in Japanese cartoons. Oh yeah, Harold Ramis would have wanted it to make it a passing of the torch story, but what happened was Sony, again, they wanted the identity politics to be a part of the female Ghostbusters, and we really didn't need the female Ghostbusters. What we really needed to see was an organic transition from one group of characters to another, like we saw with Batman Beyond. Because as I saw it, Batman Beyond was like the best thing to do with when you want to take one character and have them pass the torch, and we didn't get to see that with Ghostbusters. So with the Ghostbusters, they just wanted to push feminist identity politics, and that's why that movie flopped, because they just wanted to show, oh, here we have the strong women. But again, as I've stated before, you can't get strong women without having characters who show strength of character. So that's why the that's funny, Betty. He said that I want to make a comic that mock parody that makes fun of SJWs. 5 characters: beta male white simp, fat white feminist, woke pro black female, transgendered, and an LGBTQ person. Oh, I do like Tekken. I actually have Tekken 3 from PS1 in my closet. My PlayStation broke years ago, but I used to play Tekken 3 all the time. I mean, that was one of my favorite games. I also like Mortal Kombat, and I have Marvel superheroes as well. But that was a game that I liked. I liked Tekken 3. That one I really liked. But I haven't bought any other ones because my money has not been stable. So I wanted to buy a PS2 to play other games, but just wasn't able to get the money right to do that. So, wow. Crimson Twins go for that much? Wow. Yeah, they did have 2 versions of Ghostbusters. They had the real Ghostbusters, which came from Columbia Pictures, which featured Peter, Egon, Ray, and Winston. Then they had an adaptation called Filmation's Ghostbusters, which came from the old Filmation show called The Ghostbusters in the 1970s, which featured Jake Kong, Eddie Spencer, and Tracy the Gorilla. That one was a little bit more child-oriented, whereas Real Ghostbusters was more fantasy-based, and Real Ghostbusters was more popular because it was fantasy-based and aided and targeted towards older kids, whereas Filmation's Ghostbusters kind of died after one season. So both of them are entertaining in their own way, but I have Filmation's Ghostbusters on DVD. I wanted to get Real Ghostbusters on DVD, but the price of that DVD box set was through the roof. What are my thoughts on the Dune reboot? I wasn't really into Dune, but whenever you hear the word reboot, just get out of there, because you're not going to stay true to the spirit of the original. What they're going to do is try to change it. Yeah, all 4 seasons of Static Shock are on DVD. I definitely recommend you go see that show. That show is great. All 4 seasons are very strong, so you definitely want to get that DVD set. I was one of the guys who was like calling and advocating for that DVD set for years, and I'm glad to finally see it out here. And that's something you really want to get. Static Shock was one of the best superhero shows out there. It's one that I highly recommend. I highly recommend Static Shock. So you really want to get that cartoon. Still continuing to read through, the chats. And yeah, 4,000, that sounds just about right for, mint condition, crimson twin brothers. Yeah, that sounds about right. Especially if they're pristine and in the box, because there aren't that many of them out there. A lot of guys would break them and play with them because they were core characters to G.I. Joe. So that's about right from on card figures or mint and box figures. Okay. Yeah, I saw the trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home. That's just Agent Cody Banks. Thank you, Miracle Mark. Thank you, Miracle Mark. Yeah, Kwanzaa is a joke. I mean, Kwanzaa is pro-black, back to Africa, red, black, and green. His comics are ridiculous. They push victimology. And that last one had art so bad that it's just terrible. I mean, I still think of that wonky composition guy and Mr. Dookie Fingers. That was just something that you have to go see that comic to see how terrible it actually is. I mean, Dookie Fingers, ooh, that was bad. And all the things in there is about the evil white man, and he rips off X-Men, he rips off Superman, like with the America's Sweetheart, and he just doesn't really know how to tell or craft a solid story. Thank you, Raiders 48 Gates. Thank you very much for the donation. And that he just wants to make these black characters, but he doesn't understand that you have to give characters things like a personality, a voice. You have to give them a story that draws the reader in. Your whole story just can't be, let's destroy the evil white man and conspiracies about the white man. And that's what a Kwanzaa comic is. And what's crazy about it is he raises funds for these books, talking about the evil about these books. And that's what is mind-boggling to me. And then he just stiffs people. Like I heard a lot of comic shop owners saying that they got stiffed by your Kwanzaa, and that's not good business. I mean, if you're in business and you want to reach customers, you want to treat your customers right. And that's another thing that makes him someone that I would have issues with, is the way he treats his customers and the content he produces, because the content he produces, again, it does not present positive, balanced image of black people. It just presents the image he believes will make him appealing to white people. And that's one of those things that makes Kwanzaa's books, really difficult to get into. Because as I read them, I just wasn't impressed by them. I just thought he could have done a lot better as related to the writing, and a lot of better with the resources he did. But that last one he did, that one was just absolutely terrible overall. Who would win between Magneto and Doctor Doom? Always Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom is just ruthless, and Magneto has always been known to pull back. And plus, Doctor Doom is a super genius, so he's going to find some way to foil Magneto. So when it comes down to bad guys, Doctor Doom is one of the more formidable ones. He's one of the more dangerous ones. So you always have to say that he's going to win if he's in any sort of fight with someone. So he would really just take Magneto out. So that would be no problem. Plus, your Magneto is he's really into his own ideals and stuff. So yeah, Doom doesn't care. Okay, I'm reading through the chat some more. Hey, David Little. Yeah, but great characters and that's another thing with the comic book industry right now. They don't really use villains. I mean, guys like Doctor Doom, they have been buried by Marvel as they push their identity politics. When it comes down to these identity politics people, these SJWs, they really don't push the villains. They don't really make it where it's heroes versus villains. It's just the heroes sitting in their house, hanging out, and then they might run into one of these jobber villains that they put in cereal boxes, like your Taskmaster or one of these other villains that they can easily beat up, but there's never really any sort of danger, any sort of peril, or any sort of challenge And that's what makes these SJW books very difficult to read, because they don't really set any stakes. They don't really set any sort of challenge for the hero to overcome. And that's what makes the books impossible to read. So when it comes down to them, they don't use villains like Dr. Doom. I remember they did Infamous Iron Man. That book was all over the place. Brian Michael Bendis, really, he didn't have a focus on it. It could have been something very interesting with Doom trying to turn good, but they just didn't. Brian Michael Bendis, he doesn't know. Thank you, Benny G, for the donation. He doesn't know how to build a character up. He doesn't know how to really develop a character. They put interesting ideas up there, but they really don't know how to make a hero really stand out, and they really don't know how to make a villain compelling. Well, Rudy, they're all about agenda. With SJWs, it's always about agenda. They believe agenda is more important than profits, and that's why they want to push these agendas over things. That's why they're infiltrating industries, because they believe they can make you believe what they believe. But what's happening is people just turn around and buy something else. So that's what's happening as related to these SJW businesses. So they wind up alienating people, and those people just say, look, I've been buying this product for years. I see this new agenda coming, so they just go out here and then don't buy the product. So the same thing happened with Gillette just yesterday. I was watching the Gillette ad where they were trying to say that they were going to support the Me Too movement, and they pushed down all this identity politics on people. And what happened was people saw that and they got angry, and that's why we have this backlash with Gillette. And you have men saying they're going to boycott Gillette because they saw that ad, which was just a complete slap in the face to all men and all masculinity. That ad just told people that men were no good, men were bad, and men were bad for being men. So now men are just saying that they're not going to buy any more Gillette razors, because Gillette literally stuck a middle finger up at its core customer base. And that was just an insult to all men. I look at that, and that whole ad, I watched that whole ad last night, and I was like, you don't understand that these are things that are natural to men. These are natural male behaviors. And well, as I wrote about it in my book, The Man Crisis, what they call toxic masculinity is actual masculinity. And masculinity, the toxic masculinity, that comes from single mothers. That comes from feminists who wanted to redefine masculinity. And because they wanted to redefine masculinity, that's how we got the toxic male. And the toxic male is the one out here. He's the one going out here beating up people. He's the one going out here committing crimes. He's the one going out here participating in sexual assaults and sexual violence. He's the one out here participating in mass shootings. And he's the one out here doing damage to people. It's not the actual men who are doing this. The men who were raised by fathers and were taught how to be masculine, those were the men who would treat women with respect. It's the toxic male that's the one who's going out here hurting people. And the toxic male is the one, again, who was created by feminists. He was created by single mothers, and he was created with the idea of creating this kinder, gentler, softer man who goes out here and participates in, he's filled with anger and rage, and he hurts people. Are Harry's razors? I might have to try those. I get a lot of good shaves from a lot of razors that are store brand. The good ones I get, I used to use the knockoff of Gillette's, well, I forget what it's, Custom Plus. They used to sell that at Rite Aid because I have sensitive skin. And I was using this $2 razor that was sold at Walgreens with a triple blade, and I got a good shave with that. So there are alternatives to Gillette. You don't need to really deal with them. and their identity politics. And I haven't dealt with them in years. So there's alternatives. Well, thank you, Elkston. Thank you very much for the donation. I mean, he gave me $20. But there are numerous alternatives to Gillette. You don't have to really deal with them. So they don't know how they shot themselves in the foot by attacking men with that ad. I mean, that ad was a complete insult to men. I mean, I have to wonder, is Alice Walker working at Gillette? Because that was just as misandrist as The Color Purple. And if anybody has read The Color Purple, you know that that entire book and the movie was just a complete bash of black men. It was a complete attack on black men, and that was just a slap in the face. I used to use barber clippers at one time to shave, and I also used that's what I used to use to shave because it would keep me from getting razor bumps. But ever since I found cheap sensitive skin razors, it's been no problem. So Gillette doesn't even understand what it did. They just turned off things by trying to push that thing. Well, I haven't seen Molyneux's video. Yeah, SJWs, they have a very delusional mindset. They're very caught up in a world of ideals. They don't really live in reality. A lot of them, they have this idea of the way things should be in their head, but they don't understand reality. They don't understand people. It's like Diversity in Comics used to say in his videos. SJWs don't human very well, and I can see that from what they present in their comics because they don't really connect with people. They don't really form good relationships with people. And we can see that from the awkward dialogue they would put in the pages of their comics. When you look at one of their comics, you don't really see people coming together and having conversations. But again, a lot of them, I believe they weren't really raised in a household. A lot of them grew up in daycare, so they really don't understand how to connect with people. So they live in a world that's inside their head. They don't live in a world of real people. So that's why they have these big ideas and then they don't even catch up. That's why they just fall apart. They try to bully and shame you into believing their ideas are the thing. But when you go outside into the real world, you see that this person is living inside their head and that the things that they want to execute, they just don't work in reality. So yeah, they are big bullies and they try to control people. But once you get past their shaming language, you can easily beat them because you have facts in front of you. So that's funny, Spore Hacker. Yeah, they have committed seppuku. Living proof that you don't need razor blades to commit seppuku because they have committed suicide. Yeah, I mean, SJWs, everything they touch turns to dust. They ruined Gillette. They ruined comics. They've made all the heroes into completely emasculated wimps because when I look at Marvel's Fresh Start, that's what we got. Instead of us getting these false diversity heroes, now we have emasculated, cucked heroes like we saw in Captain Marvel #1. They completely, sup, Morpheus? I met Morpheus, I think, on the street in the Bronx when I was living on 167th Street a while back. So we've talked to each other in person. So yeah, but SJWs have ruined a lot of heroes. I mean, they've turned Superman into a divorced beta male. They've turned Batman into a beta. They have, again, like in Captain Marvel, they completely emasculated Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America in one single panel. And they have ruined everything because these people, they don't understand how people behave. They don't understand the model for superheroes. They don't understand the model for stories. And yeah, I've heard about that study that claimed traditional manhood was bad. And that's a totally false statement. I mean, natural masculinity is not bad. Natural masculinity was made by God, and natural masculinity is positive. So there's nothing toxic about masculinity. It's just feminists trying to push their redefined masculinity on men and trying to push their redefined masculinity as the standard. And this is something I talk about again in The Man Crisis. In The Man Crisis, I talk about how feminists want to redefine masculinity. Unfortunately, what happens is when you try to redefine masculinity by a feminine standard, what you get are these beta males. And unfortunately, most females are just not attracted to these beta males. And because women want natural masculinity, they want men who are going to be strong. They want men to be going to be confident, because those are the type of men that they believe will lead. Because women are looking for leaders when it comes down to men. They're looking for a man who is going to take the lead, because they know they can trust that man to provide them with a secure home environment and provide them with the resources that will allow them to be comfortable at home. So those women are looking for a man who will provide for them and care for them. And the feminist, again, she's a lesbian in many cases. She comes from a single mother, so she's not looking for a man to be a leader. And what she doesn't understand is that women are natural followers. So they're looking for a man who is going to lead. They're looking for a man who is going to have confidence. And when I was watching that Gillette video, they had a scene where the guy was getting ready to go walk up to the girl. And that's what girls want. They want that man to have that confidence to walk up to her. But then you had the black guy come up and say, oh, no, you don't do that. But that's what girls want. They want a man who's going to have that confidence. They want that man who's going to go for what he wants, because that shows that woman that that man is a leader, that shows that he is going to look out for them. And it shows that he is going to be someone who is going to be able to care for them. So that's what they want. But the SJW, which stands for Social Justice Warrior, they want you to believe in the feminist definition of manhood, which is, again, this kinder, gentler, softer man. But again, that man is an aberration to the way God created men to be and the way men have to be in order to survive. Because that beta male, again, he's quiet, he's passive, he's unassuming. And because he's quiet and passive and unassuming, he's not really going to be the type of man who can protect a woman or provide for her. And he's not going to be active about helping that family build. And this is something that is a part of natural manhood, is that natural men, they are builders and they are competitors. And the competition part is another part that APA report said they had a problem with. But what they don't understand is, competition is something that is natural to men. Without competition, you have no reason for men to do better, be better, or improve the quality of life for people, because that's all part of natural masculinity. Competition is how things get better, because women primarily are looking for comfort from a man, and they're looking for men to be comfortable. But men are not naturally comfortable. Men are competitors. Men look to do better, and they're always looking to improve. They're always looking to grow. They're always looking to do better. And the reason why they're always looking to do better is because they always want to see things improve. They're always looking to change, whereas women don't want things to change. And that's why they want their sons to become beta males, because beta males are all about comfort. Beta males are all about security, and they're all about playing it safe. But the world doesn't work like that. In order for the world to evolve and the world to change, men have to compete. And this is what the APA our article doesn't understand. They're sitting there saying that masculinity is bad, but masculinity, God made it, and because he made it, it's good. And the reason why he made it is because he wants people to grow so that they can achieve the abundant life he has prepared for them, because he wants to give you the very best, but you have to work for the very best, and that's how you get the very best. So that's something that these people don't, these feminists and SJWs don't really understand about masculinity. We need masculinity in order for civilization to grow. MGTOWs aren't feminists. I look at the MGTOW philosophy, and they are not feminists, Rudy. The reason why MGTOWs are not feminist is because MGTOW is a philosophy. It is about a man going his own way. It's about a man putting himself first. And it's about a man going out here to actualize his potential. So when it comes down to a MGTOW, usually they are focused on doing their very best for themselves, setting goals for themselves, looking to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and they're looking to move forward. Whereas feminists, they are about promoting victimology, and they are all about looking to get some sort of concessions from men. So they want to try to bully and shame men into giving them things, all based on the platform of the victim. And it's a platform that's based on empowerment by appearing powerless. Whereas MGTOW is a philosophy about a man finding his purpose and actualizing his potential and empowering himself. Feminism is all about promoting victimization and the idea of you getting crumbs from bullying and shaming people. So that's why the comic book industry is in the bad shape it's in right now, is because it's all about these feminists promoting the idea that women have been oppressed, women are victims, and that you have to give them something in order to make things equal. And that's not how you make things equal. How you make things equal is through competition. And the whole thing is that if these women wanted to be equal, they would go out, instead of saying, let's make a Star Wars with a heroine like Rey, they would go out and make their own fantasy, and they would go out and build their own universe featuring a heroine. That's what they would want to do. But the whole thing is, all they want to do is jump on somebody else's platform and take advantage of it. And that's what leads to the whole platform becoming weak, because you're looking to take over somebody else's stuff instead of going to build your own. So that's what feminists want to do with platforms like Star Wars, comics, and video games. They don't want to go out here and create their own characters, create their own stories, create their own heroes. No, they want to jump on somebody else's platform that's already established. And when they do that, they wind up alienating lots of people. So when it comes down to these feminists, that's what they want to do. And that's what's really hurting the comic book industry right now. They're trying to push their agendas in comics, and that's why people aren't buying their comics. What do I think about male feminist betas, Mac and D's? When it comes down to the male feminist beta, usually this is a guy like this Teray. He's basically a mangina. These are guys who think they can bootlick women, and that if they bootlick women, they will get their attention, favor, and approval. And usually these guys do this as part of a covert contract. So they do that because they think that if they do this, and they'll get brownie points with those women. But usually what happens is those women usually just wind up turning on them, because those women, again, don't care about these guys, and they just use them as useful idiots to push their agenda. And that's what guys like Teray are finding out right now. Teray thought, oh, he could bootlick these females and write all these articles about guys like Bill Cosby and many others. And then he thought he had a pass with these women. Like when I wrote about in my ebook, Manginas, they look like men, but they act like ladies. And he thought he could get that pass for himself once he made those advances. But what happened was those women turned the tables on him, and those women then flipped him and had him out here talking about how he was a sexual harasser. And that's what the mangina does. he will go out here and he'll support the women, but then he'll go out here and participate in the same behavior and then hope he got a pass the same way Harvey Weinstein thought he could get a pass. So that's what they do, guys like that. So, but these guys are shady, they're slimy, and they are the worst types of men. And I talked about them in depth in Manginas. They look like men, they act like ladies. You can get that ebook on Amazon.com right now. And he sat there and he was, again, the biggest pervert in the room, because, again, the mangina is the biggest pervert in the room. He'll sit there and he'll talk about how he's supporting women, but he's only supporting the women in the hopes of getting an opportunity to be able to have a relationship with them. And then when the women find out, the women then turn on him and they wind up kicking him out to pasture. So that's what guys like Teray try to do. And it always blows up in their face. And that's what's happening to Teray right now. He thought, oh, I can go in here and give these women a pass, and then they'll be in with me. And then I might have a chance, after I'm saying I'm in with them, to make a move on one of these females. And he thought, oh, I'll make a move on this female and they'll let me get by. But what happened was the woman wasn't having it. She flipped him and he lost his job. And that was just karma coming back to the that was just karma coming back to Teray, because he went out here and gave them a pass and then found out that these women were just going to destroy him too. So when it comes down to these beta male manginas, they get what's coming to them. They get what they deserve, because they will throw men under the bus saying that they're bad when they are worse than your typical guy. What do I think about the government benefits? I mean, not government benefits, government shutdown. It's just sad to see the government shut down, but sadly, this is what people voted for. I don't really like to get into too much of politics, but Americans did vote for Donald Trump, and this government shutdown is what comes with the president you voted for. If we the people, again, want to end this government shutdown, we can end this government shutdown tomorrow. All we have to do is have a recall election. So that's the only way, that's what we can do to solve the government shutdown. I mean, this is the big problem with Americans. They want things, but then they don't want to either pay for them or take responsibility for them. So the government shutdown, again, is the American people's fault, but they could end it again today or tomorrow with a recall election. The reason why this stuff is going on is because we the people allow it, and we don't have the backbone to actually stand up and go out here and get the government that we want. And as Thomas Jefferson said, if you don't like the government, you can put off that old government and put on a new government. But this is what the people voted for, and they're finding out that the America that they thought Donald Trump was going to make great again isn't going to be great. But the reason why it's not going to be great is because people just don't understand that in order to get a great America, you have to make sacrifices. You have to go out here and fight for that. And they're expecting Trump to just fix everything, when the problem, again, is not Trump. The problem is we the people, and we the people don't want to take responsibility for our government. And that's the big problem. We let the government run us instead of us running the government. So so that's the big problem with the government shutdown. We can end this in a day. So I see David, I see a launch of another comic company in response to the SJW infection. I see that as going very well for a lot of people like Richard C. Meyer, Ethan Van Sciver, because they're giving the customer what they want. Peter Samedi is giving people what they want. Josh Howard is giving people what they want. I want to give people what they want in March with the ISIS graphic novel launch. So people are launching companies out here, and creators are launching creator-owned properties out here in response to the SJWs, and they're getting the sales. I believe if they had more promotional platforms to go on, they could sell even more books. I mean, I look at the success of Richard C. Meyer and Ethan Van Sciver, and if somebody could get on a bigger platform, they could go out here and really start to sell books. I mean, if I could get on like one of these platforms, I believe I could do very well with the ISIS graphic novel, because people want comics. People like comics. There are a lot of middle of the road comic fans out there, and they're looking for a product, and they are getting product. But the whole thing is that they're getting them from independent publishers. And the reason why we have so many independent publishers is because a lot of creators don't want to go into the mainstream comic business. Also, for another reason that's leading to the decline, because it's all work for hire. And when work for hire, you don't get any sort of compensation if these characters get turned into products like Marvel Legends figures, like this Hulk figure I have here. If they make a figure of this, you don't get any money out of that. And if they make t-shirts and stuff, you don't get any money and you get nothing. So a lot of creators are just saying, I'm going to hold on to my property and I'm going to make that money myself, and I'm going to get paid for myself. So if I go out here and I create a character, and I own it myself, I can get the licensing for that character, and I can sell licenses for things like action figures, t-shirts, video games, and I can build wealth. And that's how guys like Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird became millionaires. And a lot of other creators are saying to themselves, why should I sell to Marvel when I can do this for myself, create my own platform, go out here and license my own characters, license my own products, and go out here and license stuff and then reap the royalties from those products. So that's what people are doing right now. And that's another reason why the comic book industry has not had a new character in over 20 years. The reason why it hasn't had a new character in over 20 years is because a lot of people are just saying, look, why should I give you my characters when I can go out here and own my own characters? And if these companies like toy companies like Hasbro come to me, I can go negotiate a deal with Hasbro to go make my own figures. That's what I would do with an ISIS. If I got a license for ISIS, I would be like, oh, I give Hasbro a license to make 6-inch figures or 3 3/4-inch figures. I give a Japanese company a license to make 7-inch figures. I would give one company another license to sell t-shirts, another one to do TV shows. Again, all the money is going back to the creator, and that creator is building wealth because this intellectual property has value. And this is what a lot of creators are doing right now. They're saying, look, if I come in and I create this character, I'm going to make this money. I'm not going to give it to Marvel, because if I give it to Marvel, yeah, they'll give me distribution, they'll give me sales of comics in the hundreds of thousands, but those millions of dollars are not coming back to me. So that's why we haven't seen a new character in 20 years, and that's why the industry has been on a precipitous decline. And one of the other reasons, in addition to the bad editors and the bad managers, like Dan Dido and like Sana Amanat, is a lot of creators are just saying that work for hire just does not work for them. And that's another thing I talked about in analysis of the comic book industry's business issues, is that a lot of creators are not getting any sort of profit sharing, and you just don't, when you don't have profit sharing, there's no reason for the creators to even think about creating products for you. So yeah. I'm reading Rudy's statement, and he's saying, it's clear people are not willing to make hard medicine and sacrifice. Debt levels more than 21 trillion in other countries, other currency. I believe that there may be a collapse coming to America, and that may be coming sooner rather than later, because if people aren't willing to make sacrifices, then you're not going to have a great country. Because again, we the people have to understand that in order to get to a great America, again, it requires hard work and great sacrifice. We have automation right now, but the whole thing is, what's going to collapse automation is this. You need workers to have money in order for them to buy things. And if there are no workers, then nobody's there to buy anything. So the money has to be in the people's hands if you hope to build your economy. Automation is cheaper, but the whole thing is you have no employees to buy anything, and you need people to buy things in order to run an economy, because that's something that they don't really understand. A robot has no income, so a robot can't buy products. A person buys products. So that's what I look at as related to the whole thing, as related to automation. So America is on its way to collapse, but most people, they just don't understand how close we are to collapse. Because I see the same thing happening to the comic book industry right now, where it's on the way to collapsing, because again, we're at the point where the industry is just unsustainable at this point, because you have too many books chasing too few readers. And if you don't have customers to demand the product, then you're not going to be able to get people to, hey, Mass Panther. Yeah, he's another guy. He follows me on Facebook as well. But if you don't have demand for product, then you cannot sell product. And right now, Marvel has over 100 titles, and that catalog is just too big right now to be sustained. I mean, you have over 100 books, and that's not something a publisher wants to have. You don't want to have that many books coming out monthly. You really want to have a small, lean catalog of about 12 to 16 titles, and a couple of maybe maxi series or mini series, and that's about it, because those core books that are a part of your major catalog that are primarily what you're going to use to sell, and that's how you're going to go out here and have the money to go out here and do other things. So, no, thank you, Bombor. But what they want, that's what you want when you have a catalog. You want 16 titles about max. So, now that's true, Nicholas. They don't advertise on TV. Marvel and DC don't advertise a lot. I mean, I put up ads for all my books on my videos, but they really need to. Thank you, Male Enlightenment TV. Thank you very much for the donation. But Marvel and DC, they should be advertising. They should be making ads like I do for my books. When I do a book like Isis All That Glitters, I come up with an ad for it, and that's what you see in front of my videos every time I make a video. And the reason why I do that is because I want the customer to know that this book is available, and I want them to know that this book is out. So that's why I would put an ad up. And if I'm doing this on a small scale, I'm wondering, why isn't Marvel and DC doing that to get readers to see their comics? And it's just boggles my mind. I mean, I just started running the ad for All That Glitters, which is now available in paperback, and you can pre-order on Kindle right now. And I've been running that ad for about a week now. And I'm also running ads on the regular for other books like The Man Crisis and Isis Imitation of Life. All these books have ads currently online right now on YouTube, on Black Junction, and on Black Avenger, and what's the other one I'm on? BitChute. I'm on at least about 4 or 5 platforms, so people are seeing the ads before the video, so they know that the book is available. And you would think, again, Marvel and DC would be out here making sure that people would be able to know that the product is available and know that the product is out there, because that's how you build demand up. You want to build demand for your products so that the customer knows that you're out there. And that's one of those things that, boggles my mind. They're more interested in pushing identity politics than going out here to market their books. And that's something, again, that boggles my mind. I started doing ads, starting, I think, about with Isis, All About the Goddess. I started doing marketing for it, but I really started getting heavy in the marketing with Spellbound. Spellbound, that was the one where I started 60 days before the book launched. I came out with a heavy ad campaign, and then I followed that up with a series of videos talking about the book. And then I started pushing the book and promoting the book heavy. And after I did that, I got a really strong response from the audience. I mean, I had a lot of black goths. They were going out. A lot of people in the goth subculture, they helped promote the book. And that's what led to strong sales of the book. And I don't really see that type of marketing from your Marvel, which most of the creators spend most of their time attacking people online. Again, they believe in the whole concept of the angry reader is an engaged reader. But again, an angry reader is an alienated reader, and an alienated reader does not tell their friends, because in the publishing business, word of mouth is what sells comics. Word of mouth is what sells books. And they wind up alienating people instead of trying to get people in. So I would like to see a Stop Simping in the Workplace movie. I don't know if my nonfiction is adaptable to movies, Max Panther, but maybe it would be interesting. But they don't really market enough, and they also don't really create products that really sell to younger audiences. I'm looking at Nicholas Militarescu's comment. He was saying that the target market, which the youth spends more time on their phones and devices than we do in the comic store. And that's very true. But the whole thing is that comics aren't really designed to compete anymore. I mean, the whole thing is that the things that we get on our phones don't cost that much. They provide a higher entertainment value per dollar. And I talked about that in analysis of the comic book industry's business issues, that ebook. I talked about that in depth, because you have to give people entertainment value per dollar, and your comic costs $5. And in contrast, a book like Isis, All That Glitters in paperback, this book is $7.99. So I'm giving you the equivalent of 2 comics in this very one book. And your comic now costs $4.99. And all you get is about maybe 20, 30 pages of exposition. So you're not getting a complete story. With this, you're getting a complete story. All That Glitters is going to give you a complete story. And any other Isis series book is going to give you a complete story. So you're not getting what you should have gotten from the comics. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of the youth aren't buying them, because youth are buying paperbacks, youths are buying manga, and they are buying those things, but they aren't buying comics because they don't give you entertainment value per dollar. Yeah, they're all $5 now. I mean, they're $4 to $5. They're worth $3.99, but they're $5 now because Marvel has been losing money, DC has been losing money. So in order to make their profit sheets look good, what they do is they raise the price on the books now. Umbrella Guy talks about that in depth. And a lot of people, what they do is, instead of going out to buy the comics, they wait for the trade, and that's the way they can try to save money, and that's what they do. So they go out here and they buy the trades to try to save money, because these books, when you buy them at $5 a pop, it's 5 times 5. If it's a mini series, that's $25, and if you're following a 6-issue story, that's $30. Usually, the trade is going to bring that down to $19.99 or $25. So you're not going to lose too much money. Hey, Ova. Yeah, he just came into the chat. But people buy comics because it's cheaper in trade, because they don't want to go out here and buy these books at $5 a pop, where the whole thing is that the price keeps getting higher, but the quality keeps getting lower. I mean, again, I sat there and I looked at that Captain Marvel #1, and the quality just wasn't in that book. I mean, the story was passive. The artwork was terrible. A lot of the shots were all wrong. I mean, there was like Captain Marvel on a splash page was small, and that's not something customers come out to go see. They want to see big action. When you buy a comic, you want the action to be big. You want the characters to be larger than life. You want the characters to really be bold, and we're not really getting that from these comics these days. So I look at a lot of the art again, and it's just very passive. It's very weak. And yeah, I remember those days back in the 90s. Yeah, you can get $17. You come out with 20 books. Back in 1987, you come out with $20. You come out there with about 25, 30 comics. But these days, with the comics of being $5, you're not going to come out. You have to like pick and choose what kind of books you want, and that doesn't give you incentive to try different things. I did hear about Jeff Bezos' divorce. He's the head of Amazon, and he wound up, his wife is going to get ready to make his wallet about 50 pounds lighter. He's going to lose a lot of money. And could there be a great Captain Marvel boom? I highly doubt it. I mean, Captain Marvel, the concept is terrible. The whole structure of the character is terrible. Marvel keeps trying to retcon this character, just not understanding that the book just isn't going to work. And I've looked at Captain Marvel, and again, the structure of the character is just not one that's a very strong character. She just hasn't gone on the hero's journey. She just hasn't had that character transformation arc that makes her stand out. She just has not had that character, that storyline that really make you say, I want to buy this character. I really care about this character. When you look at Captain Marvel, it's just a book that just doesn't work. Ever since Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel, she just comes off as a really desperate attempt to be like Wonder Woman. And most people see through her, and that's why her character just has not caught on. So it's a dead character from day one. So I'm not familiar with Anakin World, so I'm not familiar with that character, with that website. So yeah, Jeff Bezos is going to lose a lot of money. I mean, he's going to lose half of his fortune. So that's just going to happen to him. But sadly, he's a testament to let men know that they just can't get married these days, because he's living in a community property state and he's going to get cleaned out bad. But Captain Marvel, oh, thank you, Blast Hacker, for the donation. Yeah, they should have pushed Dust. I believe that Dust should have been really pushed to the forefront, because her character was very substantive. She was a part of the X-Men, and she was a Muslim character that was a positive image of what Muslim women are, because that's the character they relate to. She's presenting what they would want to see in a Muslim character. It's what Muslim men want to see in a character, not what Kamala Khan is. Kamala Khan, she just turns people off by the way that she is. She just comes across as really arrogant and condescending, which is the way Sana Amanat is in real life. In real life, your Sana Amanat is a very, very, very patronizing, very condescending, very paternalistic person. I had the displeasure of watching her on a video, and it was just really grating to watch. It was just really, she just was all self-absorbed, and that's not what people want to see in a character who is supposed to be a Muslim. Usually Muslim women are very humble, and that's what Dust represented on the X-Men, and that's what people wanted to see. That's who Marvel should have promoted, and that's somebody who they should have developed, but they didn't want to do that because, again, they wanted to push this identity politics down people's throats. So that's what I'm doing right now, Writer 197. I am networking with people right now, and I've networked with people in the writing business for years. So I'm on this is a forum where I network with people regarding writing. So this is how I do things, because in the publishing business, you have to, again, build relationships with people, and that's how you generate sales, and that's how you build your reputation where the clients are. So that's how you do it online. I haven't seen Titans yet, but I don't know if I want to see it, because the trailers were just so bad, and the trailers, they were difficult to watch because it's not in the spirit of the Wolfman Perez Titans. When I think of Wolfman Perez Titans, excuse me, I think of heroes who are a family. I think of a group of heroes who are friends and people who work together. So I didn't see that type of family that was in the Wolfman Perez Titans. I didn't see that core group of friends that was what Titans was all about. When I think of Titans, again, if you've read Marv Wolfman and George Perez's New Teen Titans, the first, I'd say, 25 issues, you will see how they're more than heroes. They have very, very close relationships. So that's what people wanted to see in Titans. So that show, and then that dreadful dress that Starfire was wearing, that was a complete turnoff to me as this show. So I haven't seen Young Justice because I don't have a DC subscription, but I may get one soon. But I'll take a look at it when I get a chance. I mean, I've got to get ready to see Punisher this week because I have Netflix. I have to go see Punisher. So it's on the schedule. If I get a chance, I may take a look at Young Justice. I may look at Titans, but I'm going to be definitely looking at Punisher this Friday. So get ready to see that review. That's going to be coming soon. But I'm again, I will take a look at it, but I'm not expecting much. Hard to say who I would want to see as Starfire in Teen Titans. I wouldn't mind a black actress playing Starfire, and I wouldn't mind a biracial actress playing Starfire, but I would want, and the woman who's playing it right now is fine, but the whole thing is you just want a proper costume for her. I mean, this Starfire is supposed to be Tamaranian, and I would think she would be wearing a costume from her world. Oh, how do you buy my books, Nicholas? I will try to put the link up in the description box, and no, in the chat. So let's see if I can get this. It's gonna let me. Okay. Let me see. Okay, there's a link. I'm gonna leave it. I put a link to my books in the description box. So if you want to buy my books, you can buy them on Amazon. They're also available on the iBookstore. Let me see if I can bring that up. The iBookstore. Yeah, that's where my books are, on the iBookstore, and you can download those to your iPad or your iPhone. But the thing with the iBookstore is some of the newer titles aren't on there yet, like Escape from Transylvania, Bride of Dracula. A lot of the newer titles aren't on there. The new books are on Amazon right now, a lot of them. But you can get all the paperbacks at Amazon. You can also get them at Barnes & Noble. Like all my paperbacks are at Barnes & Noble. Let me see. All my paperbacks are on Barnes & Noble, so you can get my books on Amazon if you want. You can get them on Amazon Europe. It's all over the world, so, and you can get them there. You can also get them on Barnes & Noble. The only thing is that certain ones are still on Kindle Unlimited. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get some of my books for free right now. You can get right now, I think you can get Esteem Ascension. You can get Bride of Dracula. You can get Escape from Transylvania, ISIS Imitation of Life, and Legendary Mad Matilda, and The Man Crisis. You can get them all on Kindle Unlimited for free. So you can read all of those books on Kindle Unlimited right now for free. Some of them may be getting ready to leave the Kindle Unlimited program. I may move them over to Smashwords, but you can get them right now. Thank you, William Fries, for the shout out. they keep Amanda Waller as an obese black woman because that's just core to her character. So I don't really, with Amanda Waller, that's just who she is. I'm wearing glasses today because I have to look at the screen. Usually I don't wear the glasses when I'm making videos, but I wear glasses because I have to look at the screen. I want to be able to read the chats. And the whole thing is with Amanda Waller, that was just core to her character. When she was created originally, she was a heavyweight woman, and that was to say that that was just part of her character. So I don't really see Amanda Waller's obesity as a bad thing. I just see it as who she is. It's not like what they did with the Mammy, where they were trying to make her unattractive and compared to white women. When it comes down to Amanda Waller, that's just core to who her character is. So when it comes down to Amanda Waller, I can accept her being a heavy set woman because that's just who Amanda Waller is. So when it's certain characters, I don't mind, but when I can see the identity politics, I call it out. And with Amanda Waller, I just can't call it out. Sorry, nice talking to you too, Sport Hacker. I know you have to get ready for tomorrow, so thank you very much for taking the time to be a part of the live stream. Sport Hacker lives all the way out in Holland, I believe, and over there it's nighttime. So him coming to the live stream, I really appreciate him taking time because he's been watching my channel for a long time. Really appreciate him taking the time to spend the night listening to my live stream. Thank you very much, No Filter, for your support. I'm hoping you're around for the ISIS graphic novel. He says he's going to be buying some ISIS books, but I'm hoping it's for the Indiegogo. That's going to be launching the week of the first week of March. I think I'm going to go for a March 4th launch to coincide with the launch of Captain Marvel. And that's something I'm going to do. So that's when I'm also launching ISIS. ISIS All the Glitter is already available in paperback, but I'm also going to be getting ready to launch the SJS Direct catalog right about that time. So if anybody wants 2019 catalog, that's when the thing is getting ready to launch. The SJS Direct 2019 catalog officially launches starting in the middle at March, but you can get ISIS All That Glitters in paperback right now because I want to do some pre-promotion to get people into the book so that when the graphic novel launches, they have a sense of what the story is. Endgame, do I believe Endgame will be the end of the MCU? Yeah, pretty much, because all the actors people care about are going to be gone. The story is going to get pretty much reset back to the beginning. And with SJW Marvel getting ready to come along, that's the end of the MCU as we know it. So the MCU that we loved, I think it's going to be over with Endgame. And after I looked at the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, it looks like SJW Marvel at the MCU is in full swing. So that's just, oh yeah, the books are way better when it comes down to Star Wars. I wish they would have put Expanded Universe into movie form. I mean, I wish they had given us Mara Jade. I wish they had given us all the characters from the Expanded Universe, because the Expanded Universe had way better characterizations, way better stories, and that's the direction Star Wars should have gone in. Oh, thank you very much, No Filter. Yeah, as a creator, I just try to do a lot of teaching because I want people to understand how this process of storytelling works. I want them to understand, how writing works, because a lot of people, they come into stories and they think that it's supposed to go a certain way, but when you understand the rules of storytelling, you can really craft some great stories. So that's one of the reasons why I do a lot of the comic videos, and that's why I talk a lot about the comic book industry, because originally I wanted to write comics. I wanted to go out here and be a comic book writer, and I learned a lot about writing from reading books reading lots of books, and then reading books like Sid Field's screenplay, and reading books like Robert McKee's story. And learning from watching various movies about the principles of stories. So when I go out here and I make a video about writing in comics, that was just coming from all my years of experience and all the things I learned about storytelling. So I try to share that in my videos so that people can learn from them. I had a brother, he was doing a manga comic. He was learning a lot from my videos, and that's why I want to do more videos about writing. Oh, I did that already. I did a video on the Disney-Fox merger a while back, and it's not going to be good for entertainment because we're going to get, because after the telecom bill of 96 allowed deregulated media, what we got is all these companies merging together, and instead of them competing, what we've gotten is all of these companies just creating bland, predictable things because a lot of people are just afraid of risk. When there's competition, people want to take risks, but when there's less competition, we have companies all about security. And that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of these companies remaking the same movies over and over again. And it's the reason why we have so many companies keeping TV shows on for 10, 15 years, like NCIS, Big Bang Theory. When you have bigger companies, they are more about security and playing it safe. Whereas when you have smaller companies, they're all about risk. And an example of that was when IDW first started publishing comics, they were all about risk. Image Comics were all about risk. And they were willing to try really interesting concepts and interesting ideas. But these days, they're so comfortable that they don't want to take any sort of risk. I mean, I look at TV again, and Big Bang Theory was a show, it's been on for 10 years. Criminal Minds is 10 years. NCIS is 16 years. I mean, when I was a kid and growing up in the 80s, TV show only went maybe 5-7 years, and it was finished. And the reason why it was finished was because networks wanted to get those slots back so they could continue building their schedule up. But they can't do that because the telecom bill of 96 has destroyed competition. And without competition, nobody has an incentive to do better. So if a show is making money, they'll continue to run it into the ground. And that was something I started to see even with shows like Fox and Married with Children. So they ran that show for 13 years when they should have ended it around season 7. The same thing with The Simpsons. Fox should have really ended The Simpsons around season 10, around the part of, oh man, I didn't know Family Guy was on that long, but they should have ended The Simpsons with Behind the Laughter. I always thought that that 2000 episode was the perfect finale, and that should have been the end of The Simpsons. But these TV shows, again, have gone on longer than they should have gone on. I mean, a lot of these shows, they've gone on for over 20, 25, I'm not even 20, 15, 16 years, and it's just gone on too long. I like Futurama. It's okay, but it's not Matt Groening at his best. Matt Groening at his best was The Simpsons from seasons 2 to season 9. Season 2 to 9, that was Simpsons in its prime. So if you really want to see good Simpsons, see seasons 2 to season 9. Those are some of the best episodes of The Simpsons out here. But these shows they just go on way too long, and I believe that part of it is due to that telecommunications bill of 96. That bill destroyed television, and it destroyed movies, and that's why we have these big media platforms that go on and on and on for decades. Oh, Frank Grimes episode was a great episode, Rodney. I love the Frank Grimes. What people don't know is that Frank Grimes episode, that was one of the inspirations for one of my novels, A Recipe for Success. That whole novel was really, one of the inspirations from it was A Recipe for Success, was from that Frank Grimes episode, and it was from the Billy Wilder movie, The Apartment. So that classic Simpsons was very funny, and and if you watch episodes like Frank Grimes, Monorail, those were awesome. So that if you really want to see a good one, that those some of the ones you want to see. Anything again from seasons 2 to 8, with the exception of the episode where Bart got an elephant, those are classics. Yeah, writing comics is very hard. I mean, the panels, because you have to condense so much story into panels. No Filter is absolutely right. Writing comics is hard. It's harder than writing a novel. It's harder than writing a screenplay. And I've written both of those. And the comic is the hardest because you have to tell so much story in a single image. And then you have to make that image so dynamic that it moves from panel to panel. So when you're out here, you have to really condense so much story into one single panel. So that's what makes comic writing a major challenge. And that's what I learned as I was writing the script for All That Glitters. It was just a major challenge trying to condense, a chapter into a series of panels, because the first 10 pages you would read on my blog for All That Glitters, that was actually the first chapter of the book. So in the book, it's 5 pages, but in the comic, it's 10 pages. So you have to really condense it. Yeah, manga is going to be the future for comics because manga has no identity politics. Manga has no, none of this SJW stuff. So manga is going to be the future because manga has something for everyone, and manga has something that can entertain any reader. It's easily accessible. I did see the She-Ra reboot, first couple episodes, and it was disgustingly bad. And the one thing that irked me was they were called princesses of power. And how can everyone be a princess? That's another thing that comes from our society of everybody's a winner. And I sat there, I said, how can everybody be a princess? Because in the original She-Ra, she was the princess because she was born of the queen, I forget what her name is, the queen from Eternia. So that's why she was a princess of power, because Prince Adam was the prince of Eternia and he was He-Man. So she was the princess of power. So it made sense. But when I looked at the She-Ra, it didn't make sense because they were trying to make it princesses when they were just the friends who lived in that woods out there. And that's what was just completely backwards about that She-Ra, along with the identity politics that they shoved into the show. It just made it unwatchable. I watched about 4 episodes and I had to get out of there because it was just unwatchable. Yeah, writing comics is harder than video games because video games is more like a screenplay. It's more like a movie because it's moving. If you look at the sequences for Injustice, if you look at the sequences for MK9 and MK10, it's more like a movie, but comics is a lot of concentrating. You have to concentrate so much story into a single page, and you have to concentrate it into like 6 or 7 panels. So that's a major challenge of writing comics. So when you're writing comic books, it's a major challenge. And I've also written comedy with All About Nikki, and yeah, you have to stay on top of your game there too, because you have to make your jokes just so, because that's another form of writing that's hard, because you have to be able to execute the joke and write it in a way that executes just on point, or else the audience isn't going to get it. What people don't know is that, again, a lot of books I write, like Temptation of John Haynes, Spinsterella, Spellbound, and Legendary Mad Matilda, those are all comedies. And in order to get the jokes to work just right, you have to really understand things. Yeah, No Filter. I don't think that I'm not a fan of the 32-page format. I've always said that format is going to have to change, because in order for comics to survive, it's going to have to be a much larger format. I think that the graphic novel is going to be the future. And when I look at manga, they use a longer format. And the reason why they use a longer format is because they want to be able to tell more story in one volume, because what's going to sell comics in the future is a single volume. You're going to have to be able to tell your story in that one volume, or else you're not going to be able to get the reader to stay compelled to go out and buy the next book. One of the things I do with ISIS series books is I make sure that the whole story is in one volume so that the reader can just, if they want to read this as their entry point, they can come in and read this. And then if they want to, they can go backwards to the back stories of ISIS, or they can move forward. And I do that for all my books, whether it be books like this Spinsterella trilogy. This is like the last book in the trilogy, but you can go back to Legendary Man Matilda, or you can go back to Spellbound, where she's a baby bat. And all the story is in one volume. And if you want to move forward, you can move forward, or if you want to move backward, you can move backward, and the choice is yours. So the 32-page format, it just doesn't allow you to tell the story the way you want to tell it. And the 32-page format, again, is just priced itself out of the marketplace. So when it comes down to the 32-page format, it's, as I see it, obsolete at this point, because if it's $5 for a 32-page comic, then it's just priced itself out of the marketplace. It's priced itself, right out of the threshold, because at $5, you can just put $2 or $3 more with it and pick up ISIS All That Glitters and get the same story in one volume for just $7.99. I mean, yes, it's prose format, but you're going to get the exact same story for that price of $7.99 in this paperback. So that's what you would get, and it's a lot cheaper. And that's where manga has the advantage. They're giving you a lot of stuff, and they're giving it to you for a cheaper format. You get 110 pages, and looks like we got a troll. But they give you more value for your money. So that's what they do. They give you a lot of value for your money. I mean, $10 for a manga, and I got to read more about this Rising of the Shield. Yeah, people want more. They want 48. They want 64 pages, and they want a lot more pages, and they want more story. They want more for their dollars, because again, it goes back to my point about entertainment value per dollar. So people want money. They want more for their money, and the whole thing is that they want more value for their money. They want more money. They want more value for their money. And at $10, you're going to get more from a manga than you do from a comic book, which is 32 pages. 32 pages, it just doesn't really work. I don't watch anime, and the reason why I just couldn't get into it because I just don't have the money to get into it. You want to get into John Haynes? Well, you can start with The Temptation of John Haynes. That's the book that will really lay out everything for you with the SJS Direct Universe. If you want to get into John Haynes, you start out with The Temptation of John Haynes. And that'll be the book that lays out everything for you. That is the entry point. But again, you can pick up any book, Man Who Rules the World, or the Conversation with Death. But Temptation of John Haynes lays out the entire SJS Direct universe, and it lays out everything for you. From Temptation of John Haynes, you can start into the ISIS series with Amari's Revenge, or you can start out with No Good Deed from there, because John Haynes lays it all out. It's literally like the Iron Man of the SJS Direct universe. You know, Iron Man lays out the entire MCU. John Hayes lays out the entire SJS Direct universe. Temptation lays it all out. So that's the book you want to start with if you really want to get into the SJS Direct universe. But I've had readers, again, pick up whatever they want, and it's not a problem. So, it looks like the Manifest has been reading my blogs. Are you reading my older blogs or my new stuff? So, because the new stuff, I haven't really been able to write a lot of things because I've been busy building up the YouTube channel. But the stuff I do blogs are, the older stuff is a lot of the men's issue stuff. And that's where I built my men's issues platform. But lately I've been just doing a lot of comic book blogs and blogs related to fantasy and science fiction and reviews of shows. But the older ones were where I was doing the men's issues, and the men's issues blogs were some of the most popular ones out there. And they were so popular, I decided to take the content to the YouTube channel. And that's why we don't see a lot of men's issues blogs on the blog anymore, because I was building the platform with them on YouTube. And I was also using them to be able to write books like The Man Crisis. So that's why you don't see that much men's issues content on there, because I can take that same content, put it on a blog, that's on a blog for free, and put it in a book and then sell it to readers. So this way the readers can learn and get more in depth, because that's what I do with the books. The Man Crisis, again, is what you used to get in my blogs, but in more in depth, because I can go in depth with the subject matter like I did with the Man Crisis. So yeah. Would I want to visit Japan? I wouldn't mind going to Japan. I mean, I'd like to go there and really buy stuff like hot toys. Because the action figures they have over there are just so nice. I probably would spend a lot of time in toy stores and stuff. I like Blogger. Thank you, Experienced Optimist, for the donation. I'm glad you like The Man Crisis. I put a lot of work into The Man Crisis. I did a lot of research. And that book was one I really wanted to get. I really worked on. I worked on it before we moved, because I knew how bad it was for men out here. And I wanted to make sure that more people knew about this Man Crisis, because mainstream media keeps burying what's going on with men and the problems men have, and they don't want to talk about the war on men, which we clearly saw with that Gillette ad. With that Gillette ad, we have a clear statement on how there's a war on men, there's a war on masculinity, and there's a war to make masculinity negative. But in the Man Crisis, I show you the positive traits of men while I talk about the crisis men are going through in America. Sorry, Rapper 1000. You can overcome those writing and character development issues, and one of the ways you can do that is by, one, watching a lot of movies, and two, you can do it by reading books like Sid Field's screenplay and Robert McKee's story, because that's how I overcame a lot of writing issues, is that I learned how stories worked. I learned about the 3-act paradigm. I learned about character development. And I have watched Twilight Zone in the past, but I learned how character development worked. And that's how you can get over those things, because what causes a lot of people to stop is they wind up stuck. And that happened to me on a screenplay I did called Spray 'Em Up. And I was stuck for about 3 or 4 months. And then all of a sudden, what happened was the whole story came to me because I took a minute to rest. And then what happened was I was able to finish that story. And now that's what happens. Sometimes you get stuck, but then all of a sudden you come back. And yeah, I have watched anthologies like The Twilight Zone. I still watch The Twilight Zone. Rod Serling is a master of storytelling, and he's somebody you really need to watch if you want to learn about how to write really great stories. Oh yeah, I've heard of Pokemon. I actually bought one of my cousins some Pokemon cards just this week. My thoughts on the Gillette. Oh, you talking no filter. But thank you, Rolando G, for the donation. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. But I'm out. I'm getting a little tongue tied because it's been like 3 hours and I've been talking for 3 hours. I'm about to wrap it up in about 5 or 10 minutes. But really appreciate the donation. And yeah, I was around the Pokemon came out in 1999. I originally watched the cartoon because it came on before Batman Beyond and on the WB at the time. So I'm very familiar with it and I know how it works. Back then it was only about I know about Yu-Gi-Oh too. Yeah, I used to watch that too because I was out of work at the time and just that's what I would do is watch those shows and I'm familiar. But whenever I think of Yu-Gi-Oh, it's like really funny. It reminds me of the guys in the barbershop who were playing cards and how they would trash talk as they would play cards. And whenever I watch Yu-Gi-Oh, that's what would make me laugh because I would be thinking about it like a couple of brothers in a barbershop playing cards and talking trash. And it was like hilarious. So I watched Pokemon, I watched Digimon, I've watched Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's just some of the shows I used to watch back when they had them on. But I always found Yu-Gi-Oh to be quite funny. I mean, just dark magician and all that stuff. It was just funny to me. Oh, thank you very much, Rolando G. PM for hire. I'm trying to give you guys positive stuff out there and information that you can use. That's what I try to do with these books like Man Crisis and my other books, and that's what I'm trying to do for the brothers out here so they can have that information because you're not going to get that from mainstream media. Mainstream media is gynocentric. They want to push identity politics and they want to push victimization, and that doesn't really help anyone grow. So, thank you, Governor of the Death Star. Thank you for taking time to watch my live stream during your lunch break. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I remember Yu-Gi-Oh. That was one of my shows. That and what is it? Static Shock. That was like that was my early 2000s. that was so much fun. I mean, I remember the Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician. I haven't been watching DC Universe because I don't have a DC sub, but I might get one because everybody's been asking me about it because after I saw Titans, it didn't give me any incentive to go watch it. So everybody's reminding me of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's just making me really laugh about it because I used to watch it, and again, it reminded me of guys in the barbershop talking trash. As they played cards, because the guys in the barbershop be like, "Dap, look at that," like dropping the cards. And yeah, I remember watching Static. I used to tape Static Shock. I had all of them on VHS for the longest. I had like all 4 seasons on VHS. I read heavy metal at one time, but I just couldn't get into it. It was just too heavy of a fantasy for me. But I taped all the Static Shock episodes. I remember the ones with Justice League, Green Lantern, and Superman. Those were like the big ones. So yeah, I remember Power Rangers. I was actually in college when Power Rangers first started, and the Power Rangers Classic, I was there for it. So, and I was there for Batman. That was another show I taped all of them. Batman Beyond. But my Batman Beyond season 2, it got lost. So I had to wait for DVD before I got them. Oh, thank you, Nicholas, for picking up the Man Crisis. Really appreciate it. You're going to really learn a lot from that book because in that book, you're going to learn about all the things that men are going through right now. I think I heard of Ozzy and Drix. Is that from Osmosis Jones? I think that's what that was from. That was like 90s. Yeah, that was 90s. I think that was Osmosis Jones with Chris Rock, I believe. I used to tape Power Rangers episodes too. It's like I used to I had the Green Ranger saga on tape, and I think I wore that tape out because the Green Ranger saga, the first appearance of Tommy, those 5 episodes were super tight. I mean, those were awesome. I mean, did I like Bulk and Skull? They were okay. I didn't mind them. I didn't mind anything related to classic Rangers. I can sit and watch all day long. I mean, season 1 Power Rangers, season 2 Power Rangers, up until Rocky, Adam, and Aisha, I could watch all day long. I mean, those 2 seasons were classic. I mean, everything in them was classic. I mean, everything in them. I mean, I remember, again, I taped Green Ranger saga, and I was watching it to death because those 3 episodes had so much action in them. I mean, if you want to learn how to write comics, you need to watch the Green Ranger saga. That's one you really need to watch. And any of the season 1 Power Rangers, that'll really give you a good platform and in the storytelling. But anything after that, because Power Rangers really doesn't really, as for me, come back until Time Force. Time Force was like the best one for me as related to story. The other ones were fun to watch, like Zeo and Turbo and Space, but it didn't come back until Time Force for me, really. Yeah, they did have some great messages about the hero's journey, and that's what was fun about Power Rangers. What are my thoughts on the future of the Star Wars franchise? I think they just need to really rest the Star Wars franchise right now. They've done a lot of damage to Star Wars. So as it relates to the Skywalker saga, they've really ruined it with the way they've mishandled it. And I think there may be a way to turn Star Wars around, but you're going to have to do it with a completely different set of characters, and you're going to have to focus on another side of the galaxy. One of the things I thought they should have focused on if they wanted to do a new trilogy was focus on how people felt about the collapse of the Empire. That was the story I thought they should have done for Star Wars. I thought they should have focused on what would have happened if the Empire fell and there were people getting benefits from the Empire and how they needed to find a way to survive, or how people were surviving with the collapse of the Empire. There was a great story that could have been told with Star Wars, but they just didn't tell it because Kathleen Kennedy went on this whole feminist narrative that derailed Star Wars. But there might be a possible future for it, but it requires someone to be really creative and focus on a new group of characters, a group of heroes, and a whole new hero's journey. But again, they don't want to do that kind of work. So I really hope that there could be a future for Star Wars, but I don't see it with Disney's mismanagement. Because episode 9, as I call it, I say it's going to be like end of the line for Star Wars. I don't know if we'll ever get an Icon cartoon. That's like, it was a miracle we got Static Shock, because they were thinking that Static Shock was going to fail, but then Static Shock surprised everyone by being so popular. At one point, Static Shock was #1 on the WB schedule. I would love to see an Icon cartoon because I believe it could do well, but the whole thing is that I doubt they'll be able to slip it by. Yeah, Jen from Time Force was a strong heroine, and that character was the type of heroine people want to see. That's the type of heroine readers really want to see, and that's what viewers want to see in a strong heroine. I mean, if you look at Jen, she took the lead, but she wasn't trying to be masculine. She was going through a character transformation arc, and then she did what she needed to do, and that's what we wanted to see in a heroine. That's something Kathleen Kennedy should have thought about when she was making Rey, but she didn't. She wanted to make an avatar for herself. I also like that White Ranger saga. That was another good one. Because that was like a big surprise. I remember my family member, she was at college and we were watching White Ranger and we were on the phone talking to her. And it was like the biggest surprise. I mean, nobody saw that coming with that White Ranger. Nobody saw Tommy coming. We thought it was going to be this other dude they had introduced on the show, and they used him as a red herring. And when he came out as a White Ranger, it's like everybody just lit up. I remember being there in the house, and it was like, wow. Because nobody expected him to be the White Ranger. And in between Green Ranger and White Ranger, that's what made me a big fan of Power Rangers. I mean, they just did some really good stuff on there. I mean, have you seen 2003 Ninja Turtles? The 2003 Ninja Turtles is a lot. That was one as I consider to be the definitive one. I mean, it's even better than the 80s cartoon. That one, so I'm reading through the chats. Because that one was just like the comics. That was just like Eastman and Laird comics. That one, I would sit there and watch that one on Fox Kids before it left. And a lot of people, they like the 2012 one, but 2003 one for me was perfection. I mean, that was literally like a comic come to life. So I even like that one better than the 89 version. I watched the 89 one, but it's the 2003 version that I consider to be the definitive Ninja Turtles cartoon. That's up there with Batman Animated, Batman Beyond, and Justice League, and Static Shock in terms of adaptation. I don't think Venus is canon. I don't think most people consider her canon because when you think about, 96 or 95 Ninja Turtles, that's like people forgot all about her. What are my thoughts on Brie Larson? She's completely miscast as Captain Marvel. She's basically a brick, and she has no place playing this character. She just is there and she just doesn't fit. Yeah, the 2000s have really, a lot of the heroines were really strong back then. I mean, yeah, the 2000s we got, that was really a good time for them. Yep. Even, yeah. Yeah, DC is holding Milestone back because Milestone could have been out there a long time ago. Milestone could have been out there for a long time, but the whole thing is that DC just won't let it go out here because DC does not want Milestone characters competing with their characters. So that's one of the reasons why they don't. That's why they don't really promote Milestone the way they could, and that's why they hold the license back. I have to agree with you, Jabari. Yeah, Captain Marvel's not going to do as well as the other Marvel movies. Yeah, I saw that issue of Iceman. Yeah, but that's what they try to do with black men. They try to emasculate us and they try to feminize us, and that's what they try to do with that drag queen. But that's par for the course with the SJW because the SJW oftentimes is a racist, and they try to make insults against black men by doing things to either effeminize us or try to make us fit into stereotypes. Well, there's not much Milestone can do to get their stuff out there because once you sign a license with a company and they have control of your intellectual property, they can do whatever they want with it. And that's another reason why a lot of comic creators are out here. They're not really going out to sell their books to other companies and sell their characters, because they can bury your character. And that's what we saw in the case of Giroux's Blue Marvel. What they did with Blue Marvel, is they buried him. And they buried him because they didn't want him to compete with the other characters and get as popular as they did. And that's what they do. They buried Blue Marvel. They didn't want him to be out there competing against Thor and the Hulk and making them look weak. So that's why they brought him. They put him in the background. They did the same thing with the Milestone characters. So that's where I can see a little bit of racism in the comic book industry, because whenever you have a black character who starts to get popular, they always try to find some way to bury them instead of pushing them. So that's one of those things that really annoys me as it relates to what was done with Milestone. There's not much they can do until the license is over. So no, thank you for the compliment, Gregory. I just wear the glasses in order to see. So, but Milestone, they just buried it because they don't want to compete. Okay, I'm gonna be here for another to about 2:30, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. But they just bury characters and they bury their stories. So that's one of the reasons why, as a black creator, I really would not want to work with a Marvel or DC at this point, because if I create characters for them that are black characters, they would just bury them. I haven't heard anything about Black Panther 2. Haven't heard a single thing. I don't even see anything on it as related to so-called Phase 4. They talk more about Kamala Khan than they do about the second Black Panther. And that's really dysfunctional, because when you think about it, you have this movie was #1 at the box office. And again, you would think you would want to put a sequel out almost immediately or announce it immediately. But they don't. They have not been able. They have not done anything with it. We've heard about Kamala Khan. We've heard about Eternals. We've heard about everything, but we have not heard a single word about a second Black Panther. And we should have been hearing about that immediately. Any other movie, if it made that type of money, they would have released it almost immediately. They would have said, "We coming out with a sequel." But with this one, again, it just looks suspicious that they haven't done anything with it. I mean, yeah, Milestone should have definitely gone to Image instead of DC, because then Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cowan and all those creators would have been able to own their characters, and then they would have been able to continue to launch them in the same way Tim Seeley continues to launch Cassie Hack and Hack Slash books. I mean, Tim Seeley owns his Hack Slash, and he's taken it from Image to Devil's Due to Dynamite, and he's able to do that because it's a creator-owned property. And that's what Milestone should have did. But Milestone, they wanted to get that distribution full from DC, and that's what really has tied them up. Yes, they got DC's distribution, but then again, DC, what they're going to do is protect their interests, and their interest is making sure you continue to buy Superman and Batman books and not go out here and buy static books. Well, at this point, I'm going to wrap up the live stream. I'm thanking everybody for coming to spend time to watch my live stream. Next week, I'm going to be doing another live stream, and that live stream is going to be talking about the ISIS series and all the ideas I had for the ISIS series, what inspired the ISIS character, and what inspired me to write the ISIS character. Again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be a part of the live stream. And if you want to pick up my SJS Direct books, you can do so at Amazon.com. You can pick up Temptation of John Haynes, ISIS, All That Glitters, The Man Crisis, and many others. Thank you very much. And this is going to be the end. Oh, who did the artwork for my books? Bill Walko does the covers for books in the ISIS series, like All That Glitters and Esteem Goddess Of. And Mike Williams did the cover for John Haynes, A Conversation with Death and the Legendary Mad Matilda. And Run.exe did the digital art for Spinsterella. And if you want to get those books, you can pick them up on Amazon.com. I really enjoyed writing them. I think you'll enjoy reading them. Thank you very much for spending time on the live stream, and I hope to see you next week for the discussion on the ISIS series.